We ready? Good morning. Oh, it's working this morning, isn't it? Well, I hope everybody had a wonderful evening. We certainly did. For those of you who may not have known the schedule, when we left here on yesterday, we went to a reception down at City Hall, which gave way to a candlelight vigil. It's an annual event it's a second annual candlelight vigil we had in an effort to kind of do remembrance to those who have gone before us as a result of alcohol and or drug abuse. It was a wonderful evening, and we owe a deep appreciation to all our sponsors who made that happen. But that said, this is the final day of the 2008 Houston-Harris County Regional Drug Abuse Summit, the urgency of now. And to get the day underway, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our morning MC, Mr. Cambrell Marshall of KPRC Channel 2. Cambrell.
Good morning. Thank you, Ray. It's interesting how these days I'm introduced as Cambrell from KPRC because nobody really knows exactly what I do anymore. I'm a jack of all trades. I'm the chameleon man from KPRC, the former anchor, former executive producer, now weekend morning weather, going to be working on the meteorology degree. You're never too late to go back to school and get better. So you try to do everything you can. I'm a one-man diversity is what it is. This day and age, we all have to do a little bit more. Am I right about that? The jobs are set up so we all have to do a little bit more. So I'm putting myself in the right kind of position so when the boss says, in our business right now, anybody who's got any media stock, you're hurting. Tele stations are going out of business, consolidating, all that kind of stuff. So the day when they come to me and say, well, we're going to have to cut your job, I say, well, which one? I can do 3 or 4 more. So it's going to be a great, great day. And as I get my, right now working toward my meteorology certification, in the meantime, have been a geek in that for a long time. And I've been doing that for now the past 6-7 months or so. But for the past 30 plus years that I've been in the business of broadcasting, one of the things that I've been consistent about is being involved in the community. And that's why I'm excited about being here this morning, because of what this summit represents, and that is trying to put into place some sort of plan for the next 5 years so that we can have a better grasp of what we need to do to bring about change as it relates to drug issues within our community, and to be able to be in a position where you can actually put into place 5 years worth of plan is a good thing. Certainly, we know those plans can change. We know they will change, but we have a template in place. Then we know that we'll at least be able to have something we can go to, and having the bright minds of our community in one place at one time to set aside 2 days to work on it is great to be able to do that. I know that I've heard from those who have been telling me what's been going on that yesterday was fabulous. We're going to continue that today. You'll be able to continue to hear from the elected officials who are responsible for this region in terms of putting into place the drug policies and programs, the enforcement and so forth, the data analysis. You'll hear a little bit about that as well. We'll also hear about a unique research project that is developing a vaccine for various kinds of drug use. We've assembled a panel to discuss once again, we'll call upon you. A panel is going to discuss drug sentencing. And finally, we're going to call upon you once again to put your minds together to help come up with a multi-year action plan to address the drug use and abuse in Houston and Harris County. Certainly, it is incredibly important because of all the negative effects that happens both directly and indirectly within our community. So I ask once again that you prepare your minds and your hearts and your attitudes for what will be a final productive day in the Houston-Harris County Regional Drug Summit, the urgency of now. To start it off, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce a man that I've had a chance to come to know over the last few months, even more so than I've known him from afar. As he took over for Judge Echols, it didn't take long for him to be tested in his role as a county judge because of Hurricane Ike, of course. And I kid him because I have couple of daughters, one who's now working in my business now. I tried to talk her out of it. Didn't work. She's a producer in North Carolina. My baby is a senior at TCU, and I get a kick out of his commercials because it shows his daughters. And I kid him because people really want to see his daughters more than they want to see him. And I mean that with love and affection, Judge. Just want you to know that. But welcome back to Rice, Judge Echols. Judge graduated from Rice in 1971. Judge Emmett, thinking about Echols' replacement, as he replaced Judge Echols. But he graduated from Rice here in 1971 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics, and that was before he went to UT and got his master's in public affairs. Member of the Texas House of Representatives from 79 to 87. He served throughout this region in various areas of public service. He was a member of the Transportation Committee, was a chairman of the Committee on Energy when he was as a state rep, and now he's very much developed himself in the way of communication and transportation. We saw his transportation expertise come into play as we were trying to get help to those who had been inconvenienced by Hurricane Ike in a very successful way. He serves as chairman of Harris County Juvenile Board, member of the Harris County Joint City-County Commission on Children, and is board member of the Houston-Galveston Area Council. Please give a warm welcome to Harris County Judge Ed Emmett.
Oh, they even have their own cup holder. That's cool. Well, thank you very much. Let me start by saying your scheduling of this couldn't have been much better. In a county of this size, third largest in the U.S., I have this speech. It's not really a speech, it's a welcome. You can relax. I'm not going to give you a long speech. And then my next appearance is at the Jones School right across the fountain here. Now, I don't know how that worked out this morning, but I've got to say that's the first time in my 20 months as county judge that I've gone from one building to the next to give back-to-back talks. I am not an expert on drug policy, nor am I an expert on rehabilitation. So what you're going to get from me this morning in the way of a welcome is a certain random set of observations. And understand a few things. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s. So my view of drugs is going to come from that background. And you'll hear a little bit more about that. And I promise to be within my 15 minutes allotment. I'll be okay. Because clearly anybody who came of age in the 60s and 70s has a different perspective than somebody prior to that or somebody after that. And when I went to the legislature, I was still in my 20s. I discovered a few things about a number of issues. And one issue that I came in contact with very early related to criminal justice. And I'll try and give you the short version of it. I'm a transportation guy. I was chairman of Energy. I didn't have anything to do with prisons or criminal justice. But there was this one year where I was asked to go speak to the graduating class of Lee College behind the walls in Huntsville. Now, how do you give a speech to a group that's in prison? You don't say, now go forth and do great things, because obviously they're going to be there for a while. But being young and being full of myself, I'm sure I gave a rousing speech of some type. And afterwards, I went down into the cafeteria where they were having a little reception, punch and cookies, and the families were there for these graduates. And even though these weren't, constituents, I'm brash young politician, and I'm going table to table, shaking hands with everybody, congratulating them. And I come to this one family, and it's a man and a woman and about a 4-year-old boy. And some of you may have heard me tell this story because it really impacted my life. And they're crying. And I said, hey, this is a happy day. Why are you crying? And this woman gave me a withering look and said, this is the first time he's touched his son. I went, whoa. So I started checking into this whole thing, and this was when the prison system did not allow contact visits. And so I said, well, wait a minute. And as a conservative Republican, and Bill Clements was governor, Ray Keller was chairman of the House, I guess it was Jurisprudence Committee or whatever, Criminal Justice Committee. And I said, wait a minute, this isn't right. I mean, if we're really all about family values, we're doing everything we can to destroy the contact with families when we do this to people. So why don't we allow contact visits? There's a drug point to this in a minute, by the way. And the answer I got from the officials was, well, we don't do it that way, contraband's going to come in, yada, da, da, da. But at the end of the day, Bill Clements signed that bill into law. Craig Washington, I believe, carried it in the Senate, and I carried it in the House. And it opened my eyes to the fact that sometimes we do things the way we've always done them in the criminal justice system without really necessarily thinking about the impact of what we ought to be doing long term. And so that incident has colored a lot of my approach to a lot of issues relative to criminal justice and other such policies. Then, let me jump to when I was nominated to be on the Interstate Commerce Commission. FBI came to interview me. This was right after Mr. Ginsburg had withdrawn his nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Y'all remember that? You remember what that was over? He admitted that he had smoked marijuana while he was in college. Now, today, would that be a disqualifying event? Probably not. But at the time, it was this huge scandal. It was also right after John Tower had been defeated for Secretary of Defense because he was accused as a U.S. Senator of drinking and womanizing. I can't imagine that. And so the FBI agent looked me in the eye and said, okay, I've got to ask you the Ginsburg question. And that's how he phrased it. And I went, no, I've never smoked marijuana. And he looked at me like, you're lying to me. I said, no, I never liked the act of smoking. It had nothing to do with some great moral stand. It had to do with the fact that, both my parents smoked like chimneys when I was a kid, and I never even smoked a cigarette. The act of smoking was not something that ever appealed to me. And I could tell he really didn't believe me. But the mere fact that that was such an important question, and of course he asked me the Tower question, and I thought, is this women are drinking? And he said, well, I want to know, and he phrased it, have you ever been drunk? I said, well, if you're in the back of Pat O'Brien's and you're ordering drinks by their color, does that count? And he allowed us how that probably did. But our whole approach, changes over the years, and that's what we have to keep in mind. I'm also, as was referenced, I'm actually the parent of 4 children, 2 daughters, 2 sons. You don't see the sons because they're not near as cute as the daughters. It's the bottom line. They both say, when can we be in a commercial? No, not going to happen. Don't want to mess up the role I've got going. And without commenting on any of my specific children, those of you who have raised children fully understand that if you have 4, and if you're talking about drugs, they're going to all be different. I could walk through, and I won't do it just because they're my children and it's really personal, but they've all had different experiences when it comes to drugs. And I would hate like heck for any of them to suddenly be permanently disqualified because of something they did in high school or something they did in college or something they did while traveling around the world. And we've got to keep that in mind. And when I see, and this is going to be a little political, but it's not about me, but when I see people suddenly start talking about what somebody else did when they were young and saying that has anything at all to do with where they are now, 20 or 25 or 30 years later, That offends me because, we've got to recognize that all of us did things earlier in life that we might not want to do now, and we would tell our children not to do it, obviously. As county judge, when I took this job, I knew transportation, knew economic policy, all that. But I suddenly found myself chair of the juvenile board. And as chair of the juvenile board, I have this abiding feeling that the way we approach juvenile justice is somehow just wrong. What we're doing is we're taking bad kids and we're making them into good criminals. And instead, we've got to find a way, if some kid screws up, and I'm not talking about violent crime, I'm talking about nonviolent crime. In my day and when I was a younger child in New London, Texas, if I'd done anything wrong, but I never did, if I'd done anything wrong, the odds are somebody would have picked me up and taken me home. And going home would have been far worse than being incarcerated. I'd have been better off, please take me to jail. Just don't take me home. But in today's world, we don't necessarily have that same situation. So what we've got to find are other groups. I don't care whether they're faith-based or nonprofits, to where I don't care if it's drug abuse, whether it's shoplifting, whatever it is. We've got to break this pattern early, because for too many young people, and I've gone through all the lockups, too many of them don't seem to care. I mean, okay, you lock me up. Half my neighborhood's been locked up. It's no big deal. We've got to make sure that they understand that we're trying to break that cycle early. And a lot of that cycle is tied to drugs. And what we see at the adult level already, and I think both candidates for district attorney agree with this. I've heard them speak. I assume they agree with it. We have far too many adults now, I've shifted to adults, that are in the criminal justice system that really they're substance abusers. And that's without even talking about the mental health issues. And we've got to get those people out of the criminal justice system and get them over into something that focuses on the real problem. Yeah, they're there. They may be locked up because they committed some crime, usually a petty crime, but that's not the reason. The reason they're there is because of the substance abuse. And so we can keep locking them up and letting them out and locking them up and letting them out, and that revolving door is going to keep going, and it's costing all of us a lot of money, and it's not solving the problem. So if whatever comes out of this can help address two things, and I really appreciate and look forward to whatever this report is. If it can address juveniles, and if it can address the revolving door that we have down at the county jail, then we will be a long way down the road to having a much better policy. Now, I understand also that some of this is going to the legislature, and my final comment will be simply this. As a legislator, and this is not critical, it may sound like it at first, legislators are seldom experts at anything. When I went to the legislature, the first vote I ever cast was on brucellosis. Now, how many of you know what brucellosis is? If you grew up in the country, then you understand that it's a disease of cattle. I was from suburban Houston. Only cattle we had were in meat markets. The fellow who sat behind me was a man named Foster Whaley. Foster Whaley owned a cattle feedlot in Pampa, Texas. And we joked. I said, this really kind of bothers me, Foster. My vote counts as much as yours. And I don't know anything about this subject. But then he got to vote on mass transit funding later. So it all evens out. But I tell you that story only you're going to have legislators who may come in with a fixed opinion. Just like if you had asked me about locking people up in criminal justice. If I had not gone to Huntsville, if I had not seen that firsthand, then I wouldn't have realized that, it's fine to say lock people up, throw away the key, but if we're ever going to let people out, then we want them to have a family to go back to. And the same's going to be true on whatever policy you come up with. You're going to have a built-in resistance from people who think they've got a position that they've got to stick to. And I'm telling you, I'll be happy to work with you. I know others will. Some of the judges that are here I've talked to, the sheriff, will all work because we understand the desperate need to change the policy and improve what we're doing. And I think we all are on the same page. We just need a very clear policy, and that's what you're about today. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Judge Emmett. Something to keep in mind as we go through this morning, the couple of his points, at least, that the focus on juveniles and the jail's revolving doors, and thinking about ways to make it easier for those who may be in those circumstances when they get out to have something positive to think of, some opportunities moving forward, some hope, some ability to be able to accomplish those things that they desire. I want to remind a couple of housekeeping things. Number one, a reminder, if you haven't registered, and you probably came in excited to be here as you all are, but we need to make sure that you register. And of course, the registration tables are out there in the foyer. We want to make sure that you do that. Also, reminder that there are no scheduled rest breaks, but to remind you that you certainly are free to get up and go as you need to. Certainly be respectful of others, but the restrooms are out front. Make sure that you're able to do that as you care to. And also, there's a change in schedule this morning. Congresswoman Jackson Lee will be here a little bit later. We're going to change the schedule up just a bit. Before I introduce our next speaker, I do want to recognize a couple of people we want to pay a special hello to this morning. First is Judge Caprice Cosper, 339th District Court, Star Drug Court. Judge? Just stepped out? Okay. Well, when they come back in, don't anybody say anything. Just start applauding.
There she is.
Oh, there she is. I just told them you were going to bring coffee for everybody, so they're happy to see you. Okay. Also, Judge Mark Carter, 228th District Court, Mental Health Court. Judge? Thank you both for being here. Certainly, your presence is invaluable to this process this morning. Certainly, some of the solutions that are going to come out of this will certainly be much better having been able to be filtered through your thoughts and your ideas. I want to introduce our next speaker, and I understand that she was here yesterday, but that just whet your appetite a little bit more because of what she has her expertise in. Call it the contact sport of drug policy. She is a public policy consultant representing Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, nationally recognized for advocacy and legislative accomplishments, and has had a lot of experience in many areas in understanding how to get things done. And that is critical, certainly, as we try to move forward and get things accomplished. As a member of the legislative, and she was a legislative analyst at the Office of Management and Budget and the executive office of the president for 10 years, and has, throughout that time, has been a driving force behind passage and full funding of the Drug-Free Communities Act, and has helped to save and enhance the funding and for the Safe and Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act. So there's a lot that she has done that certainly gives her a lot of credibility when she comes to the table when we talk about putting together a plan for how to solve some of the problems that we face as a community. She's highly respected as an expert on demand reduction issues by members of Congress and staff on both sides of the aisle in Capitol Hill, and that, of course, is where a lot of energy is going to have to be placed as well. We talk about certainly getting things accomplished. This is the elective season where we talk about the fact that all politics is local. Certainly everything that we do as it relates to solving problems with drug problems is going to be local. We're going to be feeding up, maybe getting help from federal and whatnot, but certainly if we wait for federal to get things done for this community, we'll be waiting for a long time. It's got to be started from here. But if we need that help from the federal level and above, certainly Sue Thao would be the one to give us some insight and roadmaps on how to get those things accomplished. So please welcome once again Sue Thao.
Well, good morning again. I understand that after the lunch speech yesterday, there were some questions about, okay, so how do we operationalize what it is that Sue Thao told us we needed to do? And I was saying you need to sort of get on the bandwagon to advocate for the programs that fund the broad array of things that you're going to need to be doing and that you are doing. So I was asked to come up here and explain how that works. Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, CADCA, the group that I represent, actually has something called a CapWiz system. And CapWiz is bigger than CADCA, but we actually pay the money to be able to have it. So basically, we send out legislative alerts every time there's an issue that we need the field to weigh in on. And because we have this CapWiz system, it's extremely easy for people like you to send letters to your entire congressional delegation. Basically, we're sending things around to every table for you guys to give us your contact information, and it's your email addresses that we need, because we have thousands of emails addresses loaded into this system so that when we say, and I'm going to use Dr. Messiah's program as an example, when we know that the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program is going to be under attack and we need thousands of letters up on Capitol Hill, we send an email out that it contains what we call a legislative alert. And it basically will give you the background on what's going on, like this program is now being considered by the House Labor, HHS, and Education Appropriations Committee, and we understand that they might not want to put all the money back in. So we need thousands of letters going to your members of Congress asking them to please make this a priority. And then what we do is we have a sample letter attached to the action alert. And because we have this CapWiz system, you just click on an icon in the action alert and it takes you to this CapWiz system and you put in your name and your address. And the first time you do this, it takes you about 2 minutes. Every other time after that, it takes about 25 seconds, and you can attest to that. The system recognizes by your zip code where you live and who your member of the House of Representatives is and who your 2 senators are. And it automatically faxes a letter that is formatted from you to your entire congressional delegation, and you just literally push a button on your computer and it automatically sends this fax to your whole congressional delegation. So I want to explain, CADCA really does take the 50,000-foot view of advocating for drug policy. We will give you action alerts. They will be sent out on everything you can think of. The DEA's funding, the National Guard demand reduction. I don't know if they're part of this summit, but their counter-drug program is fabulous, and we advocate for that. In the Health and Human Services Department, we advocate for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and its 2 centers that do drug-related work. The Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, which is where the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant is funded, Access to Recovery, screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. Most of those programs are funded in the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment. Center for Substance Abuse Prevention that Beverly Watts Davis, who spoke yesterday, was the head of, all of their programs. So NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, National Institute, I could go on and on. We really do track and send legislative alerts out on the plethora of programs that fund everything that you do at the local level that you need federal funds for. The Weed and Seed program. How many of you, are you guys a Weed and Seed site? Okay. We advocate for the Weed and Seed program. I don't know if my own program, the Drug-Free Communities program. Safe and Drug-Free Schools. So literally, we unfortunately tend to inundate people and they're like, gee, we do things other than advocate. But that's why we pay for the CapWiz system, because literally it will take you, once your name once you're in the system, it takes 2 minutes. When you go back and click on, your email address is recognized by this system, and it literally takes 10 seconds to push the button, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to download a letter. You don't have to retype it. You don't have to scan it in. You literally just click, and it recognizes your email address, and it formats the letter for your home address, your zip code, and this is immediately sent to your congressional delegation. So, as I said yesterday, contact sport, power in numbers. The way that we saved the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program the couple of times that it was actually zeroed out in the president's budget, they actually asked that it be eliminated, gone, goodbye. We ended up having Congress put the money back in because at one point we had over 25,000 letters on the Hill in support of that program. And we've been able to do that for the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. I had said yesterday, I've been doing this for 15 years. 13 of them, CSAP has been slated for between $30 and $50 million in reductions. We've gotten the money put back every year, again, because enough people have sent these faxes to the Hill that members of Congress look out for that program. DEA demand reduction program. We fought for 4 or 5 years to save that, and we were successful until, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, DEA decided to reassign the agents to something other than demand reduction. So the Hill was like, well, why would we put the money back for something that isn't doing that anymore? But we've been incredibly successful. And we've been successful because we have thousands of people who are tied into this CapWiz system, which is really easy to use. So I just would ask that as part of this summit, if all of you can give us your contact information, we will put you in our system, and therefore every time we need people to weigh in on an issue, you will be getting these action alerts, and I can't express enough how important it is to take the 20 seconds to actually push the button to have the letters get to your congressional delegation. Yes, Beverly?
Sue, would you explain to people, I know there's always concern that people think if they're a nonprofit, that they somehow can't do this and elected officials. Would you explain the difference?
Absolutely. Okay. First of all, how many of you do work for nonprofits? Okay. Nonprofits, 501c3s, first of all, actually can lobby. There's just a limit on how much. You can't use more than 20% of your first, get this, $500,000 in income to do it. And how many of you actually work for units of local government? Okay. As a private citizen from your home computer, as Dr. Peter Messiah and his home address, he can certainly send a letter to his elected official. The issue is you don't want to probably do it from your work computer. So if you have home email addresses and you'd rather get these action alerts at home, please do that. And I wasn't kidding yesterday. For the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program, when we saved it, we had a lady in Kentucky who sent the alert that we sent her out to her entire Christmas card list. And this was actually a born-again Christian who had a lot of people on that list. And every one of the people, and she sent it with a personal plea, which is, this program is really dear to my heart, and I'm asking you in the Christmas spirit to please also sign up for CapWiz. So we had people that weren't even in our field who were asked by people that they were close to and their family and their friends to please actually save this program. And that's how we got to the 25 or 30,000 letters. So, send it on. If every, it's sort of like a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme that works. If every one of you does it and then sends it to 5 or 10 other people and asks them to please do it, all of a sudden we have a major grassroots effort. And I'd like Peter to come up and talk a little bit about how this has worked. Because for the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program, this is the reason we got the CapWiz system. All of the people who run the program were actually employees of state or local government. And they were all like, we're not allowed to do this. And we don't have the time to download a letter. So we paid for the system exactly so that people could do it from their home computers. And I'd like you to speak to that.
All right, thank you, Sue, and thanks for putting me on the spot. As you know, I work for the Houston Independent School District, and as part of our policy, we cannot lobby from the work. However, I do have a personal life and I do have a home life, and because I would like to keep my home going and keep my work going, I use my personal computer to send out personal alerts to the friends, show them how to sign up for CapWiz, told them it literally takes 20 seconds. Y'all, it really takes 20 seconds. And the reason I wanted Sue to come back up again is she saved our program through this work, through this CapWiz program, so many times. It is not even believable, because when you look at it, you say $0 going into safe and drug-free schools and communities, and we're not a fluff program. We do things in our schools, and if we do those things in our schools, it is affecting the community because we are the community portion of it as well. We're supposed to partner. It's very important. As I walked around the room yesterday, I heard people saying, and my predecessor, Ann Clark, is just laughing and smiling over there. She got to retire from all this. As I walked around the room yesterday and we are looking for action plans, people said, we're going to do more advocacy. This is the how of how you build in more advocacy into our 5-year plan. It's a simple thing. Send out the CapWiz alert, send out the notification on how to sign up for it to everyone in your mailing list. Ask them to do the same thing in their mailing list and start flooding the Hill so that we can save our programs. If we don't just save our program of safe and drug-free schools, if we don't do this for CSAP and for SAMHSA, that means we don't get to write for those discretionary grants that help specific programs. And if the money's gone, guess what? We are going to do exactly what the judge said, and we're going to keep putting our young people and our communities in a revolving door in and out of the jail system without the help that they really need. So it's very important. I was very skeptical at first because I said, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to be put on a list. I was very scared of that. But when I did it and I saw, really how powerful of a tool it is and how little lobbying it really is and how empowered I am as Peter Messiah, private citizen, not Dr. Messiah from HISD, it's an amazing thing. So I encourage you to please think about that when you're building your action plan.
Is there a follow-up Texas legislature system similar? Is there one for a follow-up for the state as a federal?
I'm not sure. I'm sure that CapWiz is for the federal level, but I'm sure if you looked into it, that I can't imagine there isn't one for the state because it's a business. But I don't know if anybody here knows the answer.
There is actually, the coalitions, the drug-free community coalitions have stated, and let me get what I will do is I will give this to, because San Antonio Fighting Back actually helps run it for the state legislature. So to be able to get some of those things and actually get legislators to actually, they do it to get legislators to send up to the for Sue's issues, but for sure we need that for the Texas legislature, and they do that for that. So if you'll put it on there, we'll also make sure that it gets to the state legislature as well. Okay.
What a fabulous process. What an effective process to get things done. And Sue, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. It's Thaw, as in thaw. Thaw. Just everybody, just get those chips of ice off your shoulders and just thaw. It is a fabulous process. By the way, if you could just work on getting a little bit more energy. I want some of what you had. Was that from the coffee out there this morning? That is fabulous. And that's what it takes. People who get things done, that's what it takes. That kind of energy, that kind of commitment, that kind of dedication. So thank you. Before I introduce our next speaker, a couple of things. If you have a question or something like that from the audience, we have a microphone here, and it's important. You may be loud enough for everybody to be able to hear you, but we're also webcasting this, and the webcast may not be able to pick it up. So if you raise your hand at some point, then that'll be a good way to make sure that those people who are maybe listening in on the webcast or for a replay of the webcast, I have no idea where it's going to go from this point on. But it's one of the reasons why I'm always on my best behavior when there are cameras around. So that if anything happens, they'll be able to say he was on his best behavior. Before we introduce Dr. Castano, we're getting ready to get into a stretch where we're going to be doing a lot of listening. So this is the time to just kind of stand up. Everybody stand up where you are right now. Just stand up, let the blood circulate. If you haven't shaken hands with everybody at your table, shake hands, say good morning. Just take your time. Just say, it's a beautiful day. It's a good way to just stretch. It's amazing what your vote can do. By the way, I'm limping because I'm just getting over some surgery. I had an ankle surgery. I had a dog attack me and my four-legged son about 2 months ago. And as I turned around to kick it, it was a 135-pound dog coming my way with his teeth bared. I assumed he wasn't going to lick me. And so tried to kick him. I kicked so hard that the doctor said it was a torque fracture of my fibula just above my ankle. So that was, I'm down to the strength of about 4 men right now as a result. But I got a plate now. I used the best titanium plate he could find. I got 6 screws, so I'm in good shape. Moving. So I'm walking on my own now for the first time in 2 months, so I'm happy about that. I'm happy about introducing our next speaker as well. His bio is in the book, but I want to mention a couple of things. Dr. Thomas Kostin is a Wagner Professor of Psychiatry and Neuroscience at Baylor College of Medicine, former professor and chief psychiatry at Yale University, where he's also served the Yale-affiliated U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs VA medical system in Connecticut. You notice that these schools and programs that he's involved with are not exactly fly-by-night, pretty good schools. Couldn't get it in the Arizona State, huh? Well, I understand when you have to set your sights and do what you can with what you got. Dr. Kostin, though, is an amazing man and appropriate for this morning in establishing a mindset for what we need to get accomplished this morning. He is a founder of the Division of Substance Abuse at Baylor and Yale and directs the National Institute of Health Medication Development Center for Substance Abuse. There's the rest of his bios here. You can read it at your convenience. But these things I want to highlight. He has published over 450 papers, books, and reviews. He is a distinguished fellow in the American Psychiatric Association and fellow of the American College of Neuropsychopharmacology, past president of the American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry, and president of the College on Problems of Drug Dependence. Certainly, his expertise is exceptional for what the conversation is and what the theme is of what we're doing here this morning. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Thomas Kostin.
Thank you very much for the very generous introduction. One of the other things that I didn't put in my bio, but I think is probably appropriate for this morning, is the lapel pin that I wore this morning. It's actually a lapel pin from the Office of National Drug Control Policy, where I worked in a previous administration that I think represents a party that's, I hope, likely to take over the White House fairly soon. I realize I'm in Texas, and that's a dangerous thing to say, but I think Houston and Austin are 2 places where one is possible to say that and still end up walking off the stage without your ankle broken. So this is who I am, and now I just have to figure out how I make the slides advance. Is there a button to push or a... here we go. Thank you. Okay. As Mark Twain, another somewhat more famous person from Connecticut, once said, there are lies, damn lies, and graphs with statistics. Of course, the current status of our banking system probably emphasizes this, graphs with statistics. I am going to present some graphs with statistics nonetheless, and hopefully manage to keep you awake at the same time. In general, as this person being vaccinated says, it really won't hurt at all. So bear with me as I go through some of the things here. What we've been doing with vaccines is essentially targeting the drug rather than the brain. All of the medications and treatments that have been used up till now for treating substance abuse have effectively targeted the brain, and because of that have a variety of significant side effects on the brain. I think the most recent one you're probably familiar with is varenicline or Chantix. It's a medication for treating smoking and smoking cessation, where there has been, in fact, some serious complications, including depression, suicide, psychotic behaviors. And even though that was certainly developed with the best of intentions, no one dies, at least quickly, from smoking, and it was certainly not the intention of having a medication that might affect your mental state in that way. The rationale for the anti-cocaine vaccine, and I'll actually be talking about a number of vaccines. We are developing these vaccines while I was at Yale, and now we've continued it much more aggressively since I've moved to Baylor because of the support that the Houston community and Baylor has provided. Cocaine and all of these drugs of abuse are not immunogenic, meaning you will not make antibodies to these drugs automatically. The vaccine is a way that we trick the body into generating antibodies against cocaine or nicotine or whatever it will be. And I hope the flashing in my screen is not an indication that we're going to lose it after a while, but we'll see. If cocaine is used later, though, after the vaccination, the antibodies retain the cocaine or whatever the drug of abuse is in the blood. Cocaine, therefore, is unable to reach the brain. This is applicable primarily to therapies, is what we're developing it for, but it also obviously has prevention interventions that are, I suppose, obvious from this. What's shown in this cartoon here is that, in general, the drugs of abuse flow through the blood and then go into the brain. It's as if you're injecting the drug directly into the brain. The reason is that you have receptors in your brain. These are proteins that bind these drugs of abuse preferentially and therefore suck the drug into the brain like a magnet. So it concentrates much more in the brain than it does in the bloodstream. The role of the antibodies we produce is that these antibodies are like a big sponge in the bloodstream. What they do is retain the drug of abuse in the bloodstream, and if there's drug that's in the brain, it sucks it out of the brain. Okay, so that's what this illustration is showing here, that the drugs of abuse are in fact pulled out of the brain if they're in there, which means it's applicable to reversing overdoses. And of course, if you use drugs of abuse, it will hold the drug in the bloodstream and not allow it to get into the brain or into other organs where it, of course, does damage like heart attacks and strokes, etc. The other thing that it does is a little bit more complicated, and if you understand this slide, terrific. If you don't lose any sleep over it. But basically, it slows whatever small amount of drug does get into the brain is greatly slowed down. What that means is in order to get high from a drug, it has to very rapidly get into your brain. So if you take a drug orally like cocaine, like the Indians do in Peru, you actually do not get a high from the cocaine at all. The way you get a high from cocaine is getting it in rapidly. The most rapid ways are smoking the drug or taking it intravenously, which is the two most common ways. Smoking cocaine, of course, is called crack. The other way is snorting it, and the reason snorting works so well is the top of your nose is actually a little plate up there, a tiny little bone that connects your nose to your brain, and the drug goes through that little bone into your brain directly, and that's why snorting works, and it's different than in your stomach. If you take these in your stomach orally, they very slowly get into your brain, relatively speaking, as it takes a few minutes, whereas usually it gets into your brain with the other routes of administration within about 5 to 15 seconds. And that's the thing that makes the high, and these vaccines also prevent that rapid intake into the brain. So to summarize a little bit, what are we doing? It's a two-step process. This is an illustration nicely provided by Newsweek. On the left, under number 1, is we inject you with the vaccine. What the vaccine does is it's the little green thing with the white dots on it. It goes into the bloodstream and it produces antibodies. The antibodies are those Y-shaped things that are there. In the second step, shown on the right side, the vaccine is now gone. The vaccine doesn't last in you that long, but you then have these antibodies that are in you. The antibodies are then in there, and the white little things are the cocaine or the drug of abuse, and they attach to the antibodies and stay in the bloodstream and are not allowed to get into the brain. The red discs in there are supposed to be red blood cells. Okay. What have we developed vaccines to so far? There have been a nicotine vaccine. There's one that my group has developed. There's two other groups that have developed a nicotine vaccine. One of the others called Nabi in the United States. Another one is Cytos in Switzerland. They've recently been bought by Novartis. And the Nabi one looks like it may be bought by GSK. The market for a nicotine vaccine is probably of the order of $3 to $4 billion a year. So these are extremely profitable things, which is why the large pharmaceutical companies have, in fact, been interested in purchasing these from the small companies that have developed them. As a typical academic, I did not patent anything with the vaccine I developed, so as far as pharmaceutical companies are concerned, it's worthless, but it's nonetheless for the other drugs of abuse where we don't have billion-dollar markets, that's what it was really developed for, and it was developed really with your tax dollars. That is, it was NIH grant support that covered this, and more recently there's been support from the Houston community to work with these things, and now we've got support from both China and Russia, who are quite interested in these vaccines since they're very cost-effective to make. The cocaine vaccine is the one I'll talk about in more detail. That one is in human studies. We hope within the next 2 to 3 years to have it commercially available. Methamphetamine vaccine, we have 2 of them we've developed. They're both in animal studies. They've been developed in the 2 years since I got here to Houston. As I said, the progress we've been making has been accelerated quite a bit. The initial vaccine that I developed, we began working on in 1994, and as you can tell, it's a lot of years later, and this cocaine vaccine is now nearing something we hope would be FDA approval. These other vaccines we hope will move along a lot quicker. There's a heroin vaccine that we've now got in animal studies here at Baylor, a phencyclidine one that's ready for humans, and that's been in collaboration with the people in Arkansas. Arkansas was very interested in developing a particular type of vaccine ironically, as an alternative to the tobacco industry. What's the irony of this is the way we make this particular, it's called a monoclonal. It's a type of antibodies we give. We grow these antibodies in plants. Initially, we grew these antibodies in tobacco plants, and what we were growing initially were nicotine antibodies in tobacco plants. And there's a certain irony to having the disease being prevented by the cause, but it was fun. Other drugs that we're beginning work on is a marijuana vaccine. The one thing you can't make a vaccine to is alcohol. It is too small a molecule, and if you made an antibody to alcohol, because so many parts of your body have alcohol-like components in it, you'd actually produce a very severe autoimmune disease that would kill you. So you can't make an antibody, and you can't make a vaccine to alcohol. You just have to say no. Anti-drug vaccines, what are they? It's an active immunization, meaning we immunize you and your body produces the antibodies, which means once we vaccinate you, you are vaccinated forever. You will always be making a little bit of antibody. The hapten we use can be cocaine, opiates, amphetamines, nicotine. There's a whole variety of virtually anything you could abuse, we can make an antibody to it. The carrier proteins is the key to why this works. We have been working with the cholera toxin B. The reason we've used that as the carrier is, first off, it's available and been given to millions of people around the world. It's also a carrier that can be given orally. These vaccines, now we give them by injection, but in fact they could be changed to oral formulations, which would only be possible with a cholera carrier. The other carriers are not licensed for oral usage. But a variety of bacterial carriers we've looked at. A viral protein's also been looked at. There's a viral, the Swiss vaccine uses a viral protein. It's an interesting one in that when you get vaccinated with that, you actually get a viral syndrome each time you get vaccinated, and it takes 4 to 5 vaccinations to develop this. When I visited Switzerland and talked with them about it, I said, well, I'm sure this will work with Swiss, but I seriously doubt that there are too many Americans who are going to be willing to get a virus, the flu 5 times just to stop smoking. There's a lot of things they'll do, but they won't take the flu 5 times. But they will in Switzerland. We then have an adjuvant, and we are now working with some new peptides that have since been developed in the last 3 or 4 years that promise to make much more efficient vaccines. But again, that's a detail you don't need to worry about. How these things actually work. These very large carrier proteins, we put a chemical linker and then link the abused drug to the carrier protein. What your body's doing is making an antibody to the carrier protein. In this case, it's cholera toxin. And again, the other reason we chose cholera toxin is in the Western countries, relatively few people have had cholera and relatively few people have had cholera vaccination. So we are giving you a new protein and you develop a very robust antibody response. What it looks like is that this is, in fact, again, the details are not that important, but this is a molecular structure of what the protein looks like. The things that look like green ribbons are called beta-pleated sheets. They are hundreds, what's shown on this is, in fact, thousands and thousands of amino acids. So this is a very big protein. The loop things are alpha helices. They're like the DNA, which is a different type of helix. What you see on the outside that says drug derivative, those little orange blobs on the end, we in fact attach to the outside of these proteins about 20 to 30 cocaine, nicotine, or various other drugs of abuse. And as your body makes the antibodies to the cholera toxin, which is that big protein, it also notices that there are these funny little things hanging off the end. That is the drug of abuse, and it also makes antibodies to them. So it is a response in which the body's making antibodies to this because it's trying to make antibodies against cholera, and it somehow thinks that this cocaine or nicotine or whatever is part of the cholera toxin, so makes an antibody to it at the same time. One of the ways we've tested this out has been in animal models. Intravenous drug self-administration is an important animal model. It's very parallel to what we have in people. Animals will, in fact, self-administer all the same drugs as people do, from rats through monkeys. And what we found, this was a paper we published in Nature in 1996, was that the vaccine decreased cocaine self-administration in a rodent model. Now, admittedly, this is a little bit of the first figure that I promised I would show you a couple of that are always lies, but nonetheless, what we do is we train the rats to press a lever hundreds of times within an hour. And in that hour, they can get up to 9 injections, self-administered injections of cocaine if they hit the lever, in this case, about 600 times. And what they will do is they will hit this lever 600 times, which if you think about it in an hour is hitting that lever pretty often. So they are very motivated. If you continue to give them cocaine over what here is a 5-day period, and they get the cocaine for roughly an hour a day, they will in fact get most all the cocaine that they can get by hitting this lever about 600 times an hour. If you substitute water for the cocaine, what happens is they stop hitting the lever. Right? It takes them about 4 days, and they always still, are hopeful the stock market will come up again and, still hit the lever once in a while. If you instead continue to give them cocaine, but then instead give them the antibody, the vaccine-produced antibody, it's as if they're now getting water. It's not that they stop hitting the lever altogether, but they're hitting it as much as they would to just get water. Again, even rats are eternal optimists that somehow it's going to come back. Okay? That's how it works. So it blocks the effects. It's as if you're taking water rather than cocaine. So let me tell you a little bit about the human studies. In the human studies we've done, a couple of things are important. We vaccinate people over a period of about 3 months, 1, 2, 3 vaccinations, and what you'll see is that the antibody levels go up. The larger the dose of vaccine, the more they go up. This is a 100 microgram dose. This is a 1,000 microgram dose, so this is 10 times the dose, and you'll see that the antibody levels go up. They about double. This is the lower dose, the 100 microgram dose, but given 1, 2, 3, 4 times. If you give it a 4th time, you in fact get a much higher antibody response than you got by giving 10 times the dose. So what's critical about vaccines, it's not only important what the doses you give, but how often you give it. Okay? And in fact, how often you give it is often more important. And we now have a regimen where we give it 5 times. If you give the vaccine, though, this is again looking at different dosages of the vaccine. This is a 10, 100, and 1,000 microgram dose of the vaccine. What you can see is that the antibody levels get quite high, but this is time out to a year, 360 days. While they go up very high, they don't stay up there. Within the course of several months, about 2 to 3 months, they are coming down, and the antibody levels need to be above about this level to be useful. If you have too little antibody, you can simply override the antibody by taking more cocaine. It's a competitive antagonism, so it's a matter of having a lot of antibody so you can't swamp it. And if you go out to about a year, there is still antibody detected. That is, once we have vaccinated you, you will have some of this antibody in you forever, like all vaccines. However, the amount you have is so tiny, it's essentially useless All right, so what this means is you need to give booster vaccinations about every 2 to 3 months to keep these antibody levels up. This is not a prevention that works forever, even though with my adolescent children, I certainly wish that were true. When you vaccinate with a single booster, so it's taken 5 vaccinations to get up to this level of antibodies, a single booster, at this case given 9 to 12 months after the initial vaccination, pushes the antibodies levels back up into the therapeutic range. So you don't have to give the 5 vaccinations again, just 1 vaccination. And in fact, with some of the more recent studies we found, each time you give this 1 vaccination, the antibody levels, rather than actually here they seem a little lower, go above what they were before. So they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a theoretical limit to about 2% of all your antibody in you can be specific for something like these kinds of haptens. And we found with the newer vaccines we're developing that we can in fact reach that theoretical limit, which makes it virtually impossible to override them. We've tested these vaccines in people just like we've tested them in the animals. That is, these were studies that I did in collaboration with Columbia University. What we did is we were trying to determine the relationship between the antibody levels, so we were going to vaccinate people with a low dose and a high dose of the vaccine. These are not people who have any interest in treatment. These are people who are interested only in the money, and we pay them, in fact, to participate in these studies. And they're then given, now they're, of course, taking cocaine on their own in the real world, but they come into our laboratories and they will also get, in this, either nicotine or cocaine or whatever they're vaccinated against. I'm showing you the cocaine ones, not to be deliberately provocative. I realize this is an issue that people have feelings about terms of how you want to do this. I do want to emphasize, though, that we give cocaine to people routinely in medical practice at these kinds of dosages. Anytime we want to do nasal surgery, cocaine is the most effective drug for doing that. It's both an anesthetic and it's a vasoconstrictor, meaning it stops the bleeding. So if you're an ENT surgeon, this is the kind of dosages of cocaine you would give. So it's, by the way, about a quarter of the dosage of what people take on the street, though. They get to very high dosages. They get to dosages that, in fact, would usually kill you by escalating them over a couple of hours. What's shown here now is that we're looking at the antibodies. The people who got the low dose of antibodies had low levels of antibodies, peak antibodies. They were given 4 vaccinations over a period of approximately 2 months. These are weeks that are here, so this is the 3-month time point when the peak antibodies would occur. These are the people given the high dose of the vaccine and have high levels of antibodies. And as you can see, over the course of about a year, the antibody levels declined to 0. We're going to look at them now at this point where they're at their highest antibody levels. And you can see there are 2 groups of people, one with high antibodies and one with low antibodies. This is the group with the low antibody levels. When we give them, this is a placebo, and these are 2 increasing doses of cocaine. There's no significant difference, right? It goes down somewhat, but this is not a significant decline. On the other hand, the people with the high antibody levels, when given a modest dose of cocaine, at least, by my standards, modest, there's an 80% reduction in the effects. When they're given twice the dosage of cocaine, there's a 50% reduction. This is what you'd expect to see if you have a blocker of cocaine, that it's dose-dependent on the amount of antibody, and it's dose-dependent on the amount of cocaine. The amount of antibody we now produce with our vaccines is approximately 2 to 3-fold higher than we had in these studies, so we now get much more effective blockade. We did do an outpatient study. This is the results from this outpatient study. Double-blind, placebo-controlled, means some people got a placebo vaccine, that is just the carrier without the active vaccine. The other group got the active vaccine. It was 114 patients who were abusing both opiates and cocaine. That, unfortunately, is a very common combination. To deal with the opiates, we had them on methadone maintenance, and then they got vaccinated for the cocaine. They were given 5 vaccinations over the course of 3 months, and then we measured the antibody levels out to 3 months. What we found in that study is shown here. Once again, here are the antibody levels. They are going up by week 6. The antibody levels are really rather high, and they stay high. In fact, go up a little bit more at week 12. At this point, you're at therapeutic levels of the antibody. What's happening in this period is this is the group of people who got the placebo. This is the group of people who got the active vaccine. We are doing a variety of behavioral interventions with them. We're trying to get them to stop using cocaine, and in fact, we are reasonably successful with both groups. However, by 6 weeks, The group who did not get an active vaccine starts to relapse back. They start using cocaine again. Their cocaine-free urines drop off. Those who got the active vaccine continue to do better and better. Less and less cocaine use, more and more cocaine-free urines. So this is the evidence that by 12 weeks even, you are seeing a significant difference between these two groups, that the vaccination actually did work rather effectively to keep people from relapsing back to cocaine and, of course, to get them to stop using cocaine. What we found is that the level of the antibodies determined whether they stopped or not. The higher the level of antibody, what's shown along here, this is the amount of cocaine use they had. At the beginning of the study, when people had no level, essentially no antibody in them, 85 to 90% were using cocaine every day. In those people, as the antibody levels increased over time, some people never got past this, some people never got past this. About a third of the people got to antibodies that are up at this range. When they got to this level, and this is the target for us to try to get these high-level antibodies, they stop using cocaine altogether. It's simply a waste of their money. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't every once in a while, like the dumb rats, try some cocaine. I'm sure you lied to me that it's the vaccine doesn't really work. In fact, the people who stopped using the cocaine during the study, we asked the people two questions that were very interesting. The first question we asked was, do you think you got the active vaccine? And everybody in the study thought they got the active vaccine. Nobody thought they got the placebo. We then went to the people and we asked them who had stopped using cocaine. They said, well, why did you stop using cocaine? Since everybody thought they got the active vaccine and said in the consent form what it did. They said, so you think the vaccine worked? They uniformly said no. And we said, okay, the vaccine didn't. Well, what do you think went wrong? Well, I really need to find a new drug dealer. I think that my drug dealer is cheating me all the time because I'm sometimes feeling something from the cocaine because there's a little that gets in, but it's clearly not a high. In fact, one time I took 10 times as much cocaine as I usually get, and I started to get a little chest pain, so I knew that there was something there, but I didn't get high. It just gives you a little sense of that this is not such an easy disease to treat. And even when you have an effective treatment, they're sure that it's not effective. It's simply a bad dealer. Yes? Were there any ODs? No, there weren't. We had, surprisingly, I'm not going to say surprisingly. There were no. The thing that's remarkable about this is, first off, buying 10 times more cocaine than you usually take is not a small task. I mean, they're already spending $100, $200 a day on the cocaine, and this meant they'd have to come up with, a lot of, I don't know if rape and pillage is the right word, but a lot more money, 10 times more money to get this amount of cocaine. So they'd only do it once or twice. But we got urine levels back on these patients. We do measure urine metabolite levels, which tell us how much cocaine they actually used. We had never gotten urine metabolite levels over usually about 10 to 100,000. We got urine metabolite levels that were over 1 million in several of these people. So not only did they say they were using a lot more, but their urines were telling us they must have been using about 10 times more cocaine than before because they had lots and lots of this metabolite in them. So it clearly works as a competitive agent. The worry with this, it's not when you're vaccinated. The worry is when the vaccination wears off. Okay? So if you have somebody who's determined that they're going to get over this vaccine, that they're just going to defeat it, then all they have to do is wait about 4 months. The vaccine will then be dropping off, and when the levels of the antibody drop off, they drop off rather abruptly, you may remember from that other slide. What that means is 1 week, you're going to try some cocaine, nothing happens. The next week, you're going to take that same whopping dose of cocaine, and you're going to die. All right, that's the problem. So you have to take people who are motivated. They have to understand what it is. Now, one of the things we did with the study that I showed you with these volunteers on the street is we spent a lot of time with them telling them that they might die from this. And what we found in that study is that the people who were actively vaccinated, even though they had no interest in treatment, no interest in stopping cocaine, had a 50% reduction in the amount of cocaine use, and it lasted for a year. We asked them why did they do that, and they said, well, you really were pretty convincing that I'd kill myself if I used cocaine on top of this. So we think that while, as you may recall, there were movies that were made a long time ago about marijuana madness that were just put out by the government and are now jokes when you look at those movies. It may be that we can convey a little bit of this to these patients, that in fact overdose is a very real possibility. Not when you're on the vaccine, but when you're off the vaccine. So the treatment, obviously, for patients is going to be 2 to 3 years of repeated vaccinations about every 2 to 3 months. No one's going to get better with one set of vaccinations. Right? This is a chronic relapsing disorder. It needs to be treated that way. People have to be talked to. It's not a magic bullet. And as it goes along, they have to be convinced that, just saying no ain't such a bad idea. So what did we conclude from this study? The cocaine's better than placebo. It decreased antibody levels. That is, as the antibody levels go up, the cocaine use goes down. About 75% of the patients did get effective levels of antibodies, but only about 35% actually completely blocked the cocaine. So we want to get a better response than that. We're developing new vaccines now. It's medically safe. As I said, even 10 times more cocaine use than during the baseline, and people didn't die. In fact, they didn't feel much of anything, which they were very disappointed about. We do need an improved vaccine carrier from a big pharma company to replace this cholera toxin. We need a better carrier. Merck has been one of the companies who's actually been quite supportive. These are some early animal studies that we've done here in Houston using the Merck carrier. It's called OMPC. It's a carrier that's been around for a pediatric vaccine for about 12 years. And what you can see is in the animals, this is our cholera toxin vaccine shown in green and how much antibody it makes and how long it takes it to make, about 8 weeks to get up to this. This is the carrier we have from Merck now. What you can see is that you're seeing 2,000 versus almost 12,000, 5 to 6 times higher levels of antibodies coming up significantly faster, and it looks like they're staying up there for, in a rat, this is half their lifetime. So this is a very dramatic, exciting response. Merck has been very supportive with us in allowing us to use this. Whether they will allow us to take this carrier into people or not is hard to know, but if any of you have stock in Merck, or if you have a friend at Merck, or tell them, it's a good investment, that this is really worthwhile. It's in the public interest to do this. I have to say, the way that we've gotten Big Pharma involved in the past with this is part of the thing you may see in my CV is I was a congressional fellow for a year. One of the nice things about that is I got to organize hearings with the House of Representatives, and we organized several hearings about medications development, and we called Big Pharma in and basically embarrassed them. And said, why aren't you trying to do something to help with substance abuse? Why? Because they're not even involved with smoking, for that matter. And it was remarkable how CEOs of companies can wrap themselves in the American flag and be patriotic and do their duty when you have a congressman or two yelling at them. So I think I wouldn't underestimate CapWiz. It's a remarkable tool that really can. It does take 20 seconds. They write the letter for you. It's the work of God to, in fact, do that. I can see why the born-again Christians would support it. Okay, so what are the future prospects? Overdose treatment, relapse prevention after we get people abstinent, innovative populations to treat. We spent a lot of time at the National Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Medicine, writing a book about this, which is the criminal justice and probation parole. More than half the people in jail are in there because of drug charges. These vaccines have the potential for essentially emptying out the jails. Prevention of fetal complications by vaccinating drug-abusing mothers. When we were writing this book, it was a time where several states were in fact arresting mothers who were using drugs, particularly cocaine, during the pregnancy and putting them in jail. We thought it might be a better idea to just vaccinate them. We did some studies in sheep where we found that if you vaccinate the mother, the concern was that might concentrate the drug of abuse in the fetus. In fact, it pulls the drug of abuse out of the fetus, and these antibodies don't particularly cross the placental barrier, and so they act when in the mother to extract the drug of abuse out of the fetus. Preventing addiction in adolescence. This is obviously a very controversial area. Any kind of preventative intervention, but as a mayor of another city that I once had the privilege of being on a panel with, I won't tell you who he was, but it was of Baltimore, and he had a very creative idea. And I think it's the kind of thing, by the way, that I think, well, now that'll be too political. Anyway, I think that there are candidates for the president who might have some creative ideas like this. And what it was one, I said, at best you could vaccinate you could vaccinate probably 20 to 30% of any adolescent population. And he happened to have a degree in public health. And he said, well, have you ever heard of something called herd immunity? I said, no. I don't do veterinary medicine or anything. I don't know what that means. And he said, oh, well, it applies to people too. And what it is if you vaccinate a group for an infectious disease, and you vaccinate only a percentage of that group, what happens is the disease can't spread to the others. And so if you take the inner city adolescent population of some lovely city like Baltimore, and you get a good chunk of them vaccinated, even 20%, what happens is about every fifth person, or every fifth adolescent that the drug dealer goes up to gets the drug and nothing happens. What happens then? Well, as this mayor said, drug dealers ain't stupid. They're going to figure out what to do. They move to the suburbs. And that's what he was hoping, that he could vaccinate the inner city and just get the drug dealers to leave. And then if the suburbs wanted to vaccinate, they'd figure it out, but that it was worth the public health investment in the city, who didn't have, because the people in the city weren't going to pay for a vaccine, even if it cost $100, even if it was cheap. Of course, the suburbs would pay thousands of dollars to have their kids vaccinated. I thought it was an extremely clever idea. It forces the more wealthy, raise your hand if you're wealthy. No, I don't make $5 million, but we are the ones often who can afford the vaccine, I realize most people sit in this room. And I think that's what's going to have to happen. There's going to have to be something that drives the middle class to say, we got to do something about this. And what drives it is when their kids are involved. When the kids in the inner city are involved, they say, oh, they just shoot each other anyway, and they'll still die from drugs instead of shooting. I'm being much more pejorative than I should be. But there are, from the little city of New Haven, I can tell you, it takes a lot to get the suburbs to care about what's happening inside the city. I think Houston has been different than that. Part of the reason I've been attracted to come here is that. Maybe it's because all of Houston looks like a big suburb, but there's something about it that has made a very different atmosphere than New York or even New Haven. Let's see, just a couple of more things. There are lots of technological innovations we're working on. I talked about the oral and nasal administration of these vaccines. We are developing slow-release one-time vaccinations that will be possible. Improved adjuvant simply means ways of making higher antibody levels and letting them last longer. We have been developing with John Belmont here at Baylor some human genetic predictors of non-response to vaccination. He's been working on that for years in kids that have impaired immune functioning. And we have even given some thought with the Keck Institute here around human genetic engineering to improve immune responses. That is, we can in fact change your genes. It's not that hard, particularly if it's blood cells that we want to change. And it is what it is. We inject you with a virus, and the virus is a carrier of a piece of DNA that integrates into your own DNA, and you then start making whatever it is in there. It's a type of treatment that's probably going to be used for diabetes fairly soon. That is, you would in fact make insulin yourself by having the insulin gene put into you. It sounds horrific initially, but it ain't so bad. You saw the old guy who got the vaccination. It won't hurt. These are ways of permanently doing things. Now, obviously, we could do the same thing with these vaccines, which is we could, in fact, take the DNA that makes these antibodies and inject them into you, and you would make a lot of DNA. We think that that's probably a bit too aggressive, because it means you would never even be able to experience the joys of cocaine when you were 40, which hardly any of us would want to give up that opportunity, I'm sure. But those are the sorts of things that are in the works. Again, I want to emphasize this, a much more smart guy than I was once said. Stopping smoking is easy. I've done it hundreds of times. Stopping all of these drugs are very easy. All of these abusers have done it hundreds of times. That the real key to success is, in a sense, relapse prevention. As it says here, let's just go in and see what happens. You might argue they're not entirely detoxified there with the banana cream pie coming. It's another, obviously, disorder that we're focusing on a little bit at the moment. But it is relapse prevention we're interested in. That's really what these vaccines are about. There's nothing magic bullet about them. If people aren't motivated, there's lots of ways they can figure out to defeat them, not the least of which, if it's an injection, it's pretty hard to say, I'm going to fake that I got the injection. You can fake taking the pill and stuff, but an injection is hard to avoid. So with that, I'd like to stop, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have. Yes.
You talked about the vaccine dropping off effectiveness when the antibodies started to go down. Is there any kind of simple test to check for antibody levels, or is anything being worked on to check for antibody levels that, like one would take as a diabetic, for example?
Yes, this is a very good question. The answer is yes. We have a test that we're working on right now that's a dipstick test. You simply take the blood sample, stick the dipstick in it. If it turns green, you have a lot of antibody in you. If it doesn't turn green, there isn't much antibody in you. That would be fairly, you have to do bloods, but because it won't come in saliva or things like that because it's a protein, but it's pretty straightforward to do. We are moving along with it, and I have to say I have learned something over the years. The person I'm working with developing it has insisted on getting a patent. There's another question, yes.
Question. Did you have people that were, for example, on the vaccine for cocaine and no longer getting that high, move to other drugs? And I saw, for example, alcohol as a main concern.
Yeah, it's an extremely good question, and one would think that if we gave you a vaccine against cocaine and you still wanted to get high from cocaine, just take methamphetamine. It gives you essentially a very similar high. That didn't happen in any of our studies, and how many people have we vaccinated? Well, only a couple of hundred at this point, so I hardly have a huge sample to say this. So let's just take cocaine versus methamphetamine, because that would be the easy thing to do. Just switch over. We don't have the methamphetamine vaccine ready yet, so we can't vaccinate you against that. Nobody did that. So we asked them, as I said, first they said they simply had the wrong dealer. Well, so we suggested to them, well, why don't you go to a methamphetamine dealer then? It's a little tongue-in-cheek. And it was interesting. And what it is, it's a sociological phenomena. The people who use methamphetamine don't use cocaine, and the people who use cocaine don't use methamphetamine. And I see some people shaking their heads who probably know the answer. If you want the answer, look around Houston. If you want cocaine, you go the inner area of Houston. If you want methamphetamine, go to Conroe. And then what you'll also see is that there's an ethnic difference. The people who distribute cocaine, or at least at the lower levels, tend to be African Americans or Hispanics. The people who distribute it out in the community or out in the Conroes of the world are white kids. And these two groups don't trust each other. So what happens is they just won't buy from each other. And so they don't use the other drug. And how do you get cocaine? Cocaine is shipped into the country. It comes into, the Houston Port Authority all the time. How do you get methamphetamine? You go out in the farmhouses in Conroe, or ranches, I guess they would be here, and you manufacture it out there and blow up every once in a while, which is how we pick them up. Or you do it in a trailer that you're just going to drive the trailer around. Or in Los Angeles, they do it in 18-wheelers. They're making it in the back of the 18-wheeler, driving down the highways of Los Angeles, which one wonders when one of those blow up exactly what that's going to look like. It's a very different industry. Now, there's methamphetamine coming up from Mexico now also, since there's been new controls on buying the materials for making methamphetamine. If you've noticed, if you try to get even Sudafed or something at your drugstore, used to be you could just pull them off the shelf. Now the pharmacist, takes your name, your license plate, your name, a picture of you, your fingerprints, all that just to get a cold medicine. Because if you take a lot of those, that's how you make methamphetamine. And it's that and a couple of other simple ingredients, so the key are not there. So it's now made mostly in Mexico and shipped up, but there's still people somewhere in Conroe, out in the outback, making methamphetamine and selling it there. So that's one. The second is, if you stop using cocaine and you ask cocaine abusers, well, why do you drink alcohol? And I say, well, I don't really like alcohol, or not that much. It's okay, but I take it because it really makes the crash from cocaine a lot better. And if I stop taking cocaine, I basically stop drinking. Put the other way, if they start drinking again, they will then go back to using the cocaine. The cocaine didn't have any effect, so they didn't go back to drinking. So their alcohol use dropped. Basically all of their drug use dropped. Their opiate use dropped. This was one of the main triggers for them using drugs, was the cocaine itself. And they don't substitute. These are people who are coming to treatment. They do come to treatment because their mother told them, because the criminal justice system is kicking them in the pants, because their employer has said to them, if you don't do something, you're fired. I mean, it's external motivation, but a little of that gets internalized. I mean, they want to be in treatment. They don't want to get kicked out of treatment or kick themselves out is what it really comes down to. So, you have to have a little motivation, but it doesn't take much. I think they'll get your microphone up.
Okay. This is kind of a two-part question. One is there a long-term negative effect with the vaccine? And part two is, do you foresee this to be the future in treatment?
The answer to your first question is we've only done studies out to 2 years. That is, we vaccinated people and followed them up out to 2 years. I showed you the results at 1 year, which is you can't even detect the antibody in some people. I mean, you have to do special tests to pick it up. And there are no adverse events. We have been lucky that nobody has overdosed in this period where the antibody levels are falling off. That's the adverse event that I would worry about. All right, it's when these levels are falling off. It is relatively unpredictable, although it's going to be 2 to 3 months, but then it's going to fall off in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. It's going to go from big levels to very little levels. And if you decide at the beginning of those 3 weeks, I'm going to challenge the vaccine and see if I can get high, you won't succeed. If you decide 3 weeks later, well, I better make sure I take enough cocaine to challenge it, you'll die. It's as simple as that. Now, luckily, most cocaine abusers aren't that stupid. That is, they, in fact, start and work their way up. And when they get a high, they say, and why? Because it's expensive. I mean, it's just plain expensive to do that. So they're not dumb. And we tell them. We tell them very explicitly, this is going to fall off. And so if you want to go back to using cocaine, well, God bless you, we wish you wouldn't. But if you do, remember that this stuff is all of a sudden going to be gone. And there's no hint that it's gone. The only hint you're going to know that it's gone is when you take the cocaine and you get an effect. So you may think it's your dealer, but it ain't your dealer. It's the stuff we gave you. All right? And we just keep knocking it into people's heads. So there's no side effect other than the self-induced side effect that's very real. Cholera toxin's been given as a vaccine for about 20 years in various forms. There have been millions of people getting it. It has been virtually no safety problems with it. So that's true of these other carriers that have been around for a long time. You asked me 2 questions. The first was the safety, and the second was there 2 questions?
Is this the future of...
Oh, yeah, is this the future? Well, should you buy stock in the companies that I support? I've put 4 companies out of business that are biotechs making these vaccines. So the simple answer is don't buy stocks in companies that I help. On the other hand, immunotherapies in general, across the board, will be more than 50% of the new medicines you're going to see in the next 20 years. And probably beyond that, maybe all of the medicines you'll see. Immunotherapies are extremely specific. They're specific for the disease. We make immunotherapies now for cancers that are specific for the person. I mean, it ended up the way we made a profit in Arkansas was not by making antibodies to nicotine, but by making antibodies for cancer treatments. That is, we target the cancers very specifically. If you're a cancer patient with one of these immunotherapies, you get your own plot of about 1 acre of tobacco that we grow for you with the very specific antibody in it for your disease. So and what happens with this is it's not like cisplatin or the other things for treating cancers, which are very toxic. They have virtually no toxicity. They very specifically kill the cancer cells, and that's all they do. So is this going to... I think there's nobody who would disagree this is the future, linked with the genetics of knowing what your genome tells you about where you have time to stop. Okay, well... The next time I come, I'll tell you the rest of the story. Thank you very much.
Very enlightening, wasn't that? Very enlightening. I can see where it would be controversial in some areas as well, in terms of a lot of it, but certainly specifically learning a lot about the challenges of what goes on through the body of people who are addicted to certain things. I want to take a moment to remind all of you here that the continuing education credits are available For those who are interested, you should check the registration table for more information about that. As we heard from Dr. Costin about the challenges of trying to treat the addictions of various addicts and trying to deal with some of the problems that come directly or indirectly from those addictions, our next speaker is going to deal with some of the hard facts of where we are in terms of enforcement. Mr. Gary Hale has been assigned as the Field Intelligence Manager of the Houston Field Division since March of 2000. He's had a number of assignments within the Drug Enforcement Agency, and among them, certainly he has been exceptional in achieving. I like being around heroes. I've never really get a chance to be around many heroes, but I got a hero this morning. Mr. Hale was designated in 1995 as the Hispanic Hero Serving America. He received the DEA Administrator's Award for conceiving and implementing Operation Screaming Eagle that led to the seizure of hundreds of general aviation aircraft involved in transportation of cocaine throughout Bolivia, and then again also received a Special Act Award for his participation in Operation Just Cause, which many of you certainly recognize as the time that he helped assist in the arrest of Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega, which reminded me, I'm very good friends with Judge William Hoovler, who of course was the judge over that whole case, so it kind of brought me back to a good friend of mine. But please give a warm welcome this morning to Mr. Gary Hale.
Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see, these are my overheads, and these are my handouts. My bio was truncated by Mr. Messiah, and it's probably a good thing, because if you knew about my background in the intelligence community and my expertise, you'd probably be throwing away your cell phones and burning your clothes for fear of all kinds of bugs that a lot of us perceive just from television that exist, and that the government is always spying on us and that sort of thing. Well, I'm the intelligence manager for the Houston Field Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I want to thank you for inviting me to participate and address you during this second Houston-Harris County Drug Policy Summit. I'm really honored to be in the presence of all of you here today, the law enforcement professionals that are represented here, members of the judiciary, members of Congress and other legislatures, and the academics in the room, and everyone else who is here and who is making this conference a success. Please take into consideration the following. The information that I'm going to provide this morning is sensitive in nature, but not classified. As an intelligence professional, I'm obligated to talk about the classification of the information that I provide. This means that I will not reveal intelligence sources, but I will talk about intelligence methods. And I will talk about the results of that tradecraft, and the information that I provide is not for general public consumption, but it is reserved for official use, including the discussions that we will have here today. So as a result of that, I ask that you please do not quote me, and I'm not being funny or facetious here. I ask also that I not be recorded, and that my statements not be published. If there's any information later that you want later, however, our Public Information Officer, Special Agent Violet Teleski, who is sitting right in front. Would you mind standing up, Violet, so they can recognize you? Special Agent Teleski is our Public Information Officer in the Houston Field Division, and if you would direct your inquiries to her, I will be happy to provide you any information that you would like to receive that you heard me present here today. Like one of the slides the doctor just presented said, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. I've got a lot of statistics, but I don't want to present those statistics to you at this point. But we will provide them to you later if you just give us a call. My commission. As I stated, I'm an intelligence professional who works for DEA, but I also wear an intelligence community hat. This means that in times of need, and as determined and defined by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in Washington, I'm required to respond to any requests made by the Office of the DNI. This stems from changes made post-9/11, in which DEA joined the intelligence community in February of 2006. And As a result of that, there's a lot of changes in how DEA operates because we now have a foot in the intelligence community as well as operating in the law enforcement community as part of our mission. So my DEA lawyers tell me that I have to say that I report to DEA, but I respond to the DNI. And that's an important distinction when it comes to the information that we talk about. As Chief of Intelligence for DEA, my job is to serve as the principal advisor to the Special Agent in Charge. I just saw that our Associate Special Agent in Charge arrived from San Antonio, Mr. Rick Saldana, who's sitting right over here. Rick, if you could please stand to be recognized. Rick is the Associate Special Agent in Charge for the Houston Field Division. He covers the entire border area, and he's based in San Antonio. So I am the principal advisor to the Special Agent in Charge and other executives and policymakers in Washington. I also manage operational intelligence program that is the largest in the Drug Enforcement Administration. And that intelligence program is comprised of operational, tactical, strategic, and policy-making activities. My direct line authority extends throughout the Houston Division, and that geography starts on the east with Beaumont, goes up north to Waco, I guess it would be southwest to Del Rio, and down to the tip of Texas in Brownsville. And I say that because this geography is extremely important, not only to Texas and to Houston, but to the United States as well. Texas it makes up about 2/3 of the U.S.-Mexico border, and of that geography, the Houston Field Division is responsible for most of it. I also have indirect or dotted line authority over several intelligence collection operations that span from San Diego to Brownsville, and that also includes some intelligence operations inside the Republic of Mexico. I mention this area of responsibility because, as you'll learn as I go along in my presentation, what we do in the Houston Division, as I just mentioned, not only impacts the state of Texas and Houston, but the United States as well, given that the majority of drugs coming into the United States at this point are coming into the United States through the U.S.-Mexico border, of which Texas represents the larger part. The DEA mission. I'm going to start talking about the DEA mission, where we're assigned and why we're assigned to those locations. Then I'm going to talk about the most significant dangerous drugs that are affecting our society at the local and national levels. Then I'm going to mention or discuss international and national and local strategies that we're utilizing to attack the problem. And finally, I'll provide you with some local trends, including local pharmaceutical abuse, to try to demonstrate the enormity of the challenges that we face here in Houston and throughout the division. First, let me talk a little bit about our mission. DEA is a component of the United States Department of Justice, along with the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, Bureau of Prisons, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They just added that last part not long ago. And various divisions of the DOJ proper, and those are the attorneys that represent the government. The biggest difference between DEA and those other component agencies is that DEA is a single mission agency. That means we only do one thing, and that's enforce the drug laws of the United States. Another big difference between our organization and the other DOJ components is that we have the largest overseas presence of any federal law enforcement agency. Domestically, we're among the top 4 largest divisions in DEA, both geographically and the number of square miles of territory that we have under our area of responsibility, and in number of personnel assigned. DEA gets its authority from Title 21 of the U.S. Code, and which is also known as the Controlled Substances Act. We're an investigative, not an interdiction agency, and that's a very important distinction. In short, we enforce the laws, the Controlled Substances Act, the federal laws, and we arrest the people that break those laws. The analogy would be this: if you support the war, if you do not support the war, let's say in Afghanistan or in Iraq, but you do support the troops, that's the same thing that you could consider DEA to be. We, DEA agents, are the same as those soldiers. So if you have a problem with the policies that are promulgated by Washington, don't take it out on the DEA agents that are fulfilling those policies. We're soldiers in the drug war, and we're executing the policies that are established by our leadership in Washington. In general terms, this means that our primary focus or targets are the drug traffickers, the people who make, transport, and distribute those drugs. Interdiction agencies like Customs, Border Patrol, and the United States Coast Guard, in general terms, are attempting to stop the importation of illegal substances or items, whether they be drugs or pirated software or illegal aliens. These are significant differences, and differences that define DEA and what we do. What we do is attack the most important traffickers in the world, and we do this by gathering intelligence on the various aspects of the drug trafficking business. The same model that anyone uses or the same model that's used by anyone that makes or sells a product. The business model that I'm talking about here is a cycle. Whether you're making widgets that are produced in China or cocaine produced in Colombia, there's a process to that, there's a cycle to that, and it starts with production, and whether it's marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, it doesn't make any difference. It starts with production, it then goes to transportation, moving that product, it goes to distribution, selling that product, and then there's recapitalization of the business process to put money back into the endeavor. And those are the critical nodes that we attack to investigate and to arrest the people that are involved in that business. Those critical nodes being production, transportation, distribution, and recapitalization of the money that they make. Now, you take that cycle for a second and draw a box around it and label that box command and control. This is an important element of what we do and how we do it. That command and control element are the people that are responsible for each of those pieces in the business cycle. And those are the people that we're investigating and arresting. We investigate these traffickers wherever they operate, anywhere along that continuum. That is also represented by the adage, people who traffic from farm to the arm or from source to the street. We have several systems in place that we use to identify and target those traffickers. This is known as DEA's Priority Targeting System, and it's comprised of a number of designators, priority targeted organizations, consolidated priority targeted organizations, and regional priority target organizations. I won't go into the definitions of those, but suffice it to say that we have a very robust methodology by which we identify and target individuals involved in drug trafficking. The investigative resources that we use to investigate these targets are internal or organic, which means these are DEA personnel, special agents, and other professionals. And there are also external resources or personnel known as force multipliers, such as officers assigned to our various task forces. And those include state and local task forces, HIDTA, which is the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Agency task forces, OCDF, the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement task forces and strike forces. Military assigned, we have a lot of National Guard assigned to DEA domestically, mostly doing intelligence duties, and active duty military overseas assigned to provide us assistance in training, logistics, and intelligence. Now I'll shift over and talk a little bit about DEA's foreign mission to set the framework for our discussion about the most dangerous drugs that we encounter. Let me say that our mission overseas involves two critical business practices: institution building and intelligence collection. Institution building involves helping our allies and our host nation police agencies to be better cops, to be better police officers. And intelligence collection means that we gather information ranging from coca and opium crop yields to traffic or transportation methods to the identification of sources of supply that provide the drugs that are destined for the United States. Intelligence collection in DEA depends heavily on human sources of information or informants. That's our bread and butter. That's our methodology for knowing who to target, informants. To be sure, being the federal law enforcement and intelligence community agency that we are, we also have at our disposal the combined assets of the Department of Defense and the intelligence community at large. And this runs the gamut, and I say this in my training sessions whenever I do training in Quantico, runs the gamut from satellites in outer space to submarines and inner space and everything in between. And like Forrest Gump says, that's all I have to say about that. DEA is present in some 80 countries throughout the world, its latest editions being in Moscow, Pretoria, and Hanoi. We're soon going to be opening offices in Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, and some of the stands being around Afghanistan, such as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Speaking about Afghanistan, let me shift over to the first drug topic that I wanted to mention to you today, and that's heroin. The opium poppy, or the scientific name is Papaver somniferum L, and it's cultivated and converted into heroin in 4 parts of the world: Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, Colombia, and Mexico. Southeast Asia is Burma, Laos, and Thailand. Burma is now Myanmar. Southwest Asia is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkey. And then you have Colombia and Mexico. Afghan heroin is trafficked primarily, as Director Walters mentioned yesterday, into the European market. About 90% of the world's heroin comes from, in terms of hectares or hectares under cultivation, comes from Afghanistan. And but you might ask, well, is there Afghan heroin in the United States? And the answer, not only the United States, but in Houston. And the answer is very little, and usually not in Houston, unless it's consequentially interdicted when it gets into the United States at Houston. So you might ask, well, what is DEA doing in Afghanistan? And the answer is really 2 parts. One is that DEA is seen as the premier drug law enforcement agency in the world, and every country, whether it's a source country or a destination country, wants DEA's expertise, intelligence, and other tools in their toolkit, and that's why they want us there at their side. They want what we have. They want our people, they want our talent, and they want our resources, and that's one of the reasons that we're in Afghanistan. The other one that's equally important is that there's an important nexus between drug trafficking and terrorism, and Afghanistan plays a big part in that with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Based on our intelligence, DEA has conservatively linked 19 of the 43 designated foreign terrorist organizations to drug trafficking activities in various levels of the drug trafficking scheme. The foreign terrorist organizations are identified by the State Department and other organizations. That's where that designation comes from. We have about several dozen intelligence analysts and special agents in country at this time, but we're soon going to have about 75 permanent party personnel assigned to Afghanistan in 5 locations: at Kabul, and then 4 forward operating bases in Kunduz, Jalalabad, Kandahar, and Herat. And what's our mission there? The same as everywhere else: institution building and intelligence collection. We're in the 2nd year of a 5-year plan in Afghanistan, and that 5-year plan includes building law enforcement and judicial systems, including showing the Afghan police how to do wiretaps and how to do search warrants and affidavits and that sort of thing. Forming specialized investigative units, or what we call vetted units, and that's making sure that the people that are working alongside with us are not corrupt. And we have a very rigorous investigative routine that we put them through to make sure that they're not corrupt. And also building an airlift capability made up of Russian Mi-17s helicopters to transport the Afghan police forces throughout the country. We're also working with our British partners and coalition forces to track, hunt down, capture, and bring to justice any heroin traffickers that are violating U.S. laws. Switching over to Southeast Asian heroin, that's Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. It's really not a big problem for Houston, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that subject. I already got a little flag saying the time's running out. Colombian and Mexican heroin, let me mention here the DEA Intelligence Division has 2 important programs that you'll probably find of interest in its toolbox. One is a domestic monitoring program, and in that program, we collect heroin samples undercover throughout the United States in all 20 of our divisions. We take 10 samples from different parts of a metropolitan area, send those into our special testing laboratory where they're analyzed under another program, and that program is called the Heroin Signature Program. DEA chemists have identified methodology by which they can look at the chemical signatures of heroin and determine if heroin comes from Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, Colombia, or Mexico. So on the streets of heroin, based on those collection programs and analysis programs, we see both Colombian and Mexican heroin. In fact, since the entry of Colombian traffickers into the opium cultivation and heroin production business probably some 15 years ago or so, most of the eastern part of the country, generally east of the Mississippi, is where you see most of the Colombian heroin on the streets. And in contrast, most of the western United States sees Mexico as the primary source country for heroin. Cocaine. Cocaine comes from the coca leaf, Ethoxylum coca, that is cultivated in the Andean ridge countries of Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia. It's shipped in ton quantities from those countries into Mexico and then across the border, our border, the Texas-Mexico border, destined for the rest of the country, to be sure, Houston as well. DEA works in all of those countries to attack traffickers at the source and in the transit zone. Those are the countries in Central America in between South America and Mexico. There was a study done a couple of years ago. This is pretty funny. We're talking a lot about geography here, so I'll just throw this out. A study done a lot of years ago where some high school kids were asked, where's Central America? And the answer was Kansas, Nebraska. So, no. The Central America I'm talking about is south of Mexico and north of Panama. And that's called the transit zone. All right, here's the current situation with cocaine. It is in short supply nationwide. Don't be confused or misled, however. It takes a little effort and little cocaine hydrochloride, the finished product, to step it down into base or the crack form. And this is why crack or base is still a prevalent problem in the United States, including Houston. So it doesn't, even if a lot of cocaine is not getting into the United States, it doesn't take much to make it into crack. The U.S. drug market is experiencing a severe adjustment in cocaine prices and availability, and those problems are, in turn, affecting the per dosage unit purities. We have those statistics, but I don't have them with me, but we'll be happy to provide them to you if you contact us about the purity levels of cocaine throughout the country. The reason for this historical change in cocaine availabilities throughout the United States is because of the brave efforts of Mexico's President Felipe Calderón. Since he took office in 2006, he has fielded over 150,000 Mexican army and other military elements to fight the cartels. Our intelligence sources reveal that cocaine is still leaving the source countries in enormous quantities. It is still arriving in Mexico in large quantities. I'm talking about multi-tons, 20, 40, 50 tons at a time. But the cartels can no longer move that product through Mexico with ease. This has caused cocaine quantities to be smuggled into the United States at this point in tens of kilos and occasionally in hundreds of kilos, and with much less frequency than ever before. So the inability of the cartels to move their product into the United States unimpeded is the cause of the violence being seen all over Mexico today. Just in the past 10 days, for example, some 8 Mexican soldiers have been beheaded in Monterrey, which is not far from here, by the cartels. So this is terrible. And the reason the cartels are ruthless and that they're killing everyone, including competitors, innocents, and government forces, is because they're trying to find corridors that they can dominate to cross their drugs into the United States. And that's all drugs. It's heroin, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, and so forth. Marijuana, Mexico has a temperate climate and plenty of rainfall and as many harvest seasons as the ground will allow, or nature will allow. Sometimes this means as many as 6 harvests per year. Our evidence lockers on the border, let's say Laredo, McAllen, are just brimming full. And by brimming full, I'm talking about tons and tons, tens of tons of marijuana that are being stored pending judicial process or destruction. It's an amazing, amazing problem. And many, many tons, even though we're seizing, we, federal law enforcement and other state and local law enforcement agencies combined, even though we're seizing tons and tons and tons of marijuana, other tons are still making it to the Houston area. Marijuana is thought by some to be the sustaining revenue product of the Mexican cartels. That is to say that the cartels' profit margins are sustained by the revenue generated by marijuana when other products such as cocaine are not available for marketing. And I'm almost done here. Methamphetamine, prior to 2005, as the doctor said before me, most of the methamphetamine that was being produced clandestinely was being produced here in the United States. The diversion side of DEA, it's a component of DEA that is charged with the regulatory and criminal investigations regarding doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical manufacturers, helped write the Combat Meth Act of 2005 that virtually eliminated the diversion of over-the-counter ephedrine and pseudoephedrine products that meth cooks were using to make methamphetamine. Enter the Mexican traffickers into the methamphetamine production business. At this time in our evolution, Mexico accounts for most, if not all, of the wholesale quantities of methamphetamine that we find in the United States. DEA, in concert with our Mexican counterparts, has identified most of the Mexican-based precursor chemical traffickers. In other words, they can't get the precursor in the United States anymore, so they move the laboratories to Mexico. Now they're importing, just like they're importing ton quantities of cocaine into Mexico to bring to the U.S., now they're importing ton quantities of ephedrine to make methamphetamine in Mexico and then bring it to the United States. So that's happening, and we're working hard to identify and locate those laboratories and arrest those methamphetamine traffickers. To be sure, methamphetamine is continuing to be seized on the border on a very frequent basis. Large loads, anywhere from 30 to 100 pounds at a time, and that's a lot of methamphetamine, though in infrequent iterations. Yes, some, but not most of that meth is finding its way onto the streets of Houston. Alrighty, the diversion of pharmaceutical drugs is also becoming a significant problem in Houston. The diversion program manager, Judette Black, is here. Judette, raise your hand. Where are you? Are you here? Okay, she's in charge of that program. She's here today, and she's a professional responsible. Thank you, Judette. She's the professional responsible for investigating this aspect of the drug abuse problem. We also have the Tactical Diversion Squad Supervisor, Supervisory Special Agent Mike Delacorte. Mike, please stand to be recognized. Mike is here today. Mike and his troops are responsible for conducting investigations, surveillance, wiretaps, and prosecuting those traffickers in Houston that are involved in any aspect of the diversion of pharmaceutical drugs. The intelligence program that I manage, working alongside and in support of the diversion professionals that I mentioned and all the troops that work under them, have identified dozens of illegal pharmacies in Houston that are involved in these abuse schemes. These are active investigations, and I can't really go much more into it, but I will say that thanks to Agent Delacorte and Agent Selesky, you'll soon be seeing some billboards in Houston inviting the public to report any information they would like to DEA with regard to this abuse problem. All right, this was my my Around the World in 80 Minutes type presentation. This is all I could, as much as I could give you without being here for 3 days without stopping to take a breath. So I'll open up to any questions that you might have real quick. Yes?
The internet prescription drug illegal distribution, how are y'all attacking that? Because I understand it's really a convoluted process.
Yeah, those are probably, the question is, what are we doing about internet, the trafficking of pharmaceuticals via the internet? Is that the question? Yeah. It's complicated, but it's being worked on. We have a section at our Special Operations Division in the Washington area that specializes just on internet intercepts. The process is the same. You have to get a warrant from a court to intercept anybody's emails or go on to their websites or things of that nature. The same processes apply as if you were going to somebody's house. So you have to have a probable cause. You have to have a lot of information that makes you believe that a crime is being committed. And then the technology part of it is even more challenging and more difficult. So yes, we're working on that as well. That is something that we're certainly involved in heavily, but doesn't really normally see the public eye. Ma'am.
Don't need a microphone in court. All right. In talking with Director Walters yesterday, his chief deputy, anecdotally I was aware of this, but I didn't realize how big a problem it apparently is in Houston, that we have the unique distinction of having probably the biggest problem in the United States with Xanax and Vicodin.
Yes.
And I see a lot of that, but I did not realize that other large cities are not seeing the same problem. Is there any reason from your perspective why we would have a particular problem with those two drugs?
I don't know the reason why. I can just tell you that, yes, we have a tremendous problem here, and we are addressing that problem. Ms. Black and Mr. Delacorte are the investigators that are on top of it. I don't work in Dallas or in Denver, so I can't tell you what the rest of the country is experiencing, but it is a big problem here. I said dozens, and I don't want to give you a number because it would reveal the extent to which we've penetrated these illegal pharmacies, but there are dozens in Houston, and it's purely a criminal activity. There's no other way to describe it. If you would like offline, we'd be happy to talk to you more about that, Judge. Okay? Any other questions? I think somebody up here in front had. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I was listening, and I think I heard you use the term that you depended upon informants.
Say it again?
Informants, you use informants.
Informants, yes.
To get your information.
Yes, sir.
How dependable are these people? Do you check their credibility? Because we deal with a situation, a small town, where the sheriff depended upon an informant to get the information of the people in the community that was involved in the selling of drugs. Half of the town was arrested on this man, this informant, that the sheriff was using his information. And come to find out he had a criminal history himself, but yet the sheriff depended upon this man's information. Do you really check them out before they provide you with information?
The answer to that, of course, is yes. And the only way to work in the criminal environment is to, unfortunately, dance with the devil. When it comes to informants, you have to be involved with crooks to be able to work against other crooks. But I will say this with regard to if you want to call it the veracity of informants, how truthful are they or how valid is their information? Every informant that is documented by DEA has to sign sort of a contract, a document that says that they're willing to testify. So if somebody is willing to testify and somebody does indeed testify, then they have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if you don't tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you go to jail. So that right there gives you a little bit of credibility, if you will, gives the informant some credibility, and that credibility is tested just like any other person who gets on the stand is tested and questioned and cross-examined to the extent that the information hopefully is valid. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm sure I probably might. But one of the questions that came up in our interaction yesterday, or actually one of the statements, was that around the country, as people come forward, they're hurt, they're victimized, they're targeted by if they're testifying against gang members or traffickers or et cetera. And I know we dealt with this in San Antonio. You know our story, as I had my colleague who we were working with killed. My question is, and it prevents people from wanting to come forward because they do have to ultimately testify. And these are people who are not involved, they're neighborhood people. I'm not sure what we can do, because it's a constitutionally right to face your accuser. Is there anything going on in law enforcement to tackle this? Because you know the issue I'm talking about, but many people want to come forward, but they're afraid. And the gang members and drug dealers they're not afraid of going to jail. And they are targeting people, and they do hurt them.
Right. Well, that's a quandary. There's no question about it, and that's usually left to the judiciary, to the district attorneys, U.S. attorneys' offices, to work those issues out with the witnesses. Once we investigate and provide evidence to the prosecutors, then the prosecutors take over dealing with, or the defense attorneys, deal with preparing those witnesses and determining who's going to testify and that sort of thing. So it's not something that we really get involved with too much. All right, thank you very much, folks. I do want to say that in closing, we're all given a very serious commission to safeguard the public, and in this context, I truly believe that everyone in this room is a soldier of God. In Romans 13:1-2, God delegates authority to mankind. The Bible says everyone must submit himself to governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. And in verse 13:6 it reads, "For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing," and that's all of us here. The Bible is mentioning you, each of you and myself in this passage. So whether it's protecting the public from so-called individual choice issues, such as assisted suicide, abortion, or drug use, we as authorities governing these many multidisciplinary programs represented here today have a moral obligation to save any and every human from harming themselves or others, specifically in our case, by using drugs, because to allow that harm is to allow harm to come to humanity and to allow the ultimate decay, disillusion, and ultimately the death of mankind. I know in my heart that each of you are here as I am and are doing what you're doing because you're following the dreams that God placed in your heart and not just because you took a job that was available at the time. Knowing this, I'm proud to work with you, and I'm proud to have addressed you today. Witnessing your dedication, seeing your work at these top exercises that we've done, I'm confident that our cities, our states, and our nation are being protected and preserved by the governance that you bring to these programs. This concludes my presentation. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. That's pretty compelling information, and beyond that, pretty compelling. We can say, look, no cameras, no, but boom, gone, just like that. See, I have to be on my best behavior. You just wave the magic wand and it's gone. Need to get some of that. We're getting closer to the opportunity for us to go from yesterday's challenge at this time of the day, but about what is the problem, to how do we solve the problem. As we get ready to do that, I want to remind everyone that if you haven't had a chance to sign up on the CapWiz sheet, that if you have one on your table, if you get it over here to the table to my right, that'll be helpful because Ms. Starr is not going to be here all day, but if we have that information, that'll be helpful. From the next person I'm going to introduce has got a lot of information about how to deal with the challenges of our prisons, our prison systems. She is from Justice Concepts Incorporated. She is going to be talking about the criminal justice system and how we view this industry and the linkages between law enforcement, the courts, and incarceration. She's had a great deal of experience in running systems and also in helping to clear them out, coming up with processes and programs in order to do that. I want to cut this short. I had a nice long thing, but we want to give her an opportunity to get up and go for it. Please welcome Dr. Nancy Insko.
Thank you. As a former marathon runner, I'm going to see if I can talk as fast as I run here, because I know we're short on time, but I hopefully am going to give you some information that is practical and appropriate and easily applied. My background in government, and the reason I'm going to kind of repeat some of this is because it didn't come out in the intro, so let me just tell you from where I come. I was a warden of an adult male maximum security facility for about 8.5 years, and the warden of a multi-security level adult female institution for 3.5 years. I was also the state secretary for parole and probation in the state of Maryland, and various positions in corrections policy, advisement to governors and attorneys general in my career. About 14 years ago, I joined with my colleague, Dr. Alan Beck, to form our firm, Justice Concepts. We are a criminal justice consulting firm headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. And for the last 14 years, we have provided assistance to state government, county government, large municipality governments, as well as a number of private companies who are engaged in the business of corrections and the criminal justice system. A lot of you know who those are. These are the folks who bombard the exhibit halls at the big conferences like the American Correctional Association, the American Jail Association, and many others who might have business acumen, but they do not understand the criminal justice system, and they do not understand government at all. So it's been particularly interesting over the course of my years in consulting to work with these folks as well. But let me just, I think, share with you today where my background and my consultancy practice really has merged to provide what I believe is the greatest application of my skills and talent, but yet we still have a lot of work to do. We provide probably the greatest services to counties, and large metropolitan counties who are facing some very complex criminal justice issues. And these counties usually have not kept the pace of growth in their infrastructure as the demographics have demanded and will be demanding over the next 20 years. We have seen in these counties how the agencies are crushed under the weight of the spiraling criminal justice populations, offender populations, increase in crime, particularly juvenile crime, and the seriousness of the health, I guess is the best way to put it, of those persons in the criminal justice system who have been long-time addicts and have co-occurring disorders. As consultants, we mostly respond to requests to come fix the problem. When we get that call, things are not good. There have been a number of what I call catalytic events that have commanded our presence, such as jail overcrowding suits, escapes, suicides, political campaigns that have called upon the experience of one individual versus another, and we've been called in as neutral parties to really assess the situation. Many times we are called into communities and counties who really need to build more jail capacity at the county level, but they are not able to get these tax referendums passed. Perhaps they cannot turn to private underwriters who are shying away from the government business a lot more today than they were even 5 years ago. And so we are called in to provide solutions. And when we go on site, it is not a good scenario. So what I thought might be an interesting exercise and a little departure here from PowerPoint and listening to statistics and many other esoteric conversations is that we're going to do a virtual tour this morning of the criminal justice system in XYZ County. And I'm going to ask all of you to, as we did in the old days before we had computer-driven simulated models, to close your eyes and as we go on this tour, and just think in your mind's eye what you may be seeing. So if you'll please join me, we're going to get in our pretend vehicle, and we are going to first start at the county jail. The county jail, after we'd been admonished by the commissioners or whoever brought us into the county, that you've got to understand we're a very conservative jurisdiction. We can't do all those liberal things that they do up north. We have unique problems here. They're not like anybody else's. So don't try to superimpose a number of solutions that aren't going to work here. So it has to be very individualized and tailored to our unique problems. And despite the fact we find common themes, we always do tailor our recommendations to that unique need of that jurisdiction. So we're now going to look at the unique needs of the jail. The jail is short-staffed. They've had excessive use of overtime. They're very overcrowded, probably by at least 30%. They have defendants sleeping on the floor in from any kind of cot, mattress on the floor, or the commonly loved plastic cups, as I call them, that they can toss out that are kind of weightless in weight. I guess they're very, very light. They throw them out on the floor anywhere that they can fit them. And so many times when we tour these jails, we're literally walking over inmates. And all of those inmates that might be collected around an area have access to maybe one or two toilet facilities, one or two sinks, and just a handful of showers that may be available for a tier of 150 to 200 men or women, depending upon where the site is in the jail facility. We go to the booking and receiving section of this jail, and we see lines of defendants handcuffed together or handcuffed to chairs who are waiting to be processed. Sometimes they spend days in that booking facility before they're dressed out and put up on a housing unit. We see many, many parole and probation violators who constitute the largest category at intake in any single jail facility in the United States today. And the majority of these individuals are being returned to custody because of not being in compliance with a term of their probation or parole order. They've not been rearrested on a new offense, but they have been issued a warrant and brought in on what many of us call a technical violation or an administrative violation, mainly driven through the fear of their supervisory agent that we know if they are not showing up for their scheduled face-to-face office appointment, if they are not showing up at work, if they have given us any dirty UAs over the last 2 to 6 weeks, we're fearful that they're engaged in a number of unlawful activity, and therefore, as a preventative measure, we're going to bring them in and incarcerate them. And sometimes these folks, awaiting to get back on a judge's particular schedule, await a hearing before that judge as much as 10 months to a year in several jurisdictions. So there they are, not rearrested, but in there awaiting a further sanction, which the majority of the time will be continued on community-based supervision. But they're being held and taking up one of those precious beds in that jail. Jail beds, I might add, in this country average anywhere from a low of perhaps $42 a day to upwards of $90 a day, depending on the jurisdiction that it is. We see many, many females in a facility not designed to house them. We see a medical provider in this jail frantic to try to meet the needs of a population whose health is not only probably very precarious, but many people who have never seen a doctor or a dentist or a nurse for many, many years, if ever. We will then progress to the pretrial services section of this jail, where pretrial release services may have an office. However, they can't do their job because, and in all due respect, I ask that if there's any bail bondsmen in this audience here that they just bear with me here, but many times the pretrial staff are not allowed to do their job for 72 hours to 96 hours. They're not allowed to interview those persons who are there immediately after arrest because the bail bond community has first crack at seeing who can afford their services. So by the time that pretrial release actually can interview these defendants, they have already been in jail for 3 to 5 days. They are an indigent population because these are the folks who can't afford the bail bondsman. So this becomes an indigent supervision agency if in fact that they can put these folks out on pretrial release. And there's a number of other conditions that have to apply, and perhaps they just don't meet the criteria and have a phone and an address and all the kinds of things that we would like these folks to have if their lives were organized. From there, we go to the prosecutor's office. This poor beleaguered soul whose prosecutors, assistant prosecutors, have way too many cases, and they are insistent upon not giving any breaks to anybody. So the lowest level misdemeanant and the highest level felon are probably going to get the same result at initial appearance or first appearance in front of the judge. Usually, these are very young prosecutors right out of law school who are trying to find their way through the thing we call the criminal justice system. Due to their inexperience, they are fearful that if they give any breaks to anybody, it will come back on their head, and their job might be in jeopardy. So these poor souls, very terrified by the 300 cases that they have to handle, are not very willing to be very cooperative in the criminal justice process. We then go to the public defender's office. That public defender is so overwhelmed and so understaffed and so not an advocate for its client because of the fact that they are underpaid, they don't have sufficient number of positions that have been allocated for their agency. And so instead of being the system cheerleader, instead of being the advocate for their clients, they are barely able to carry around their 500 cases per attorney to try to figure out who it is next they've got to see in what courtroom. We then go to the drug and alcohol treatment providers and the mental health treatment providers, and we find that they, again, are understaffed and under-resourced. They would love to help these clients, but by the time they get the information that there's an individual who's incarcerated that needs their services, that person's probably been there a month and has been taken off of their medication, which gave them stability in the community. And you've got a medical care provider in a jail who's trying to progress their less expensive formulary that might be arcane by some 20 or 30 years, and trying to transition this defendant or offender on a different, much less expensive psychotropic medication, and then deal with the fallout of the side effects and the less than stable condition that that person is in. And perhaps that medical provider does not have enough bed space in the medical unit. So then these individuals are put back on the housing units, which are already overcrowded, and they are there in general population, being very disruptive to the other inmates, as well as the staff, who then respond to these episodes in a very punitive sense, and may decide to pull out the taser, which has, in fact, caused many, many deaths in the United States in jails in the last 3 to 5 years. We then go to the court, and we see judges who plead for more resources, plead for inpatient beds, plead for some kinds of diversionary resources so they don't have to keep these individuals incarcerated. But yet they, too, are trying to figure out their role between social worker, judicial officer, and the trier of fact. So the picture that I'm trying to relate to you, as this car now goes back to the garage, and many of you would like to stay parked, what I'm trying to show to you or demonstrate in this illustration today is that county systems are being patched together with very, very few resources, very little education about how to manage well, and they are many times overlooked in terms of adequate funding to deal with truly what is the front end of the state criminal justice system, and to some degree the front end of the federal criminal justice system. Our company, Justice Concepts, we are practitioners first, academicians second. We come in and we usually look at 10 different points along a continuum in which to help these counties, but we find that the greatest use of our services and expertise is actually to come in, roll up our sleeves, and provide hands-on assistance to the people who are trying to manage and solve these very difficult problems. We are usually tasked with assisting counties to build that continuum of correctional options to support the jail and the overuse of jail as the only correctional alternative. We do, in fact, write reports many times and give recommendations, but we often find, and we have found over the last 14 years, that once we render that report, it's going to sit on the shelf because nobody else has time to implement it. So the greatest use of our expertise, experience, and ability is to really come on site and actually provide support and actually head up the implementation of these recommendations. And that, we have found, is really does set us apart in many ways for other consultants, but it lets us feel that we have actually been able to initiate some change to the status quo in that very beleaguered criminal justice system in that county. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, knowing that I only have a few moments left, and I want to have some time for question and answers. And I really struggled with what to present today, because there's many, many things that I see over the course of the duration of my experience in government and now my experience as a consultant. And maybe some of those things that I will have an opportunity to talk with a number of you during the tabletop exercise or even subsequently this afternoon. But what I wanted to share with you was some truisms that I believe everybody needs to understand about local jail facilities and things that set jail facilities perhaps apart from prisons. No jurisdiction will ever build your way out of the problem. Every bed will be filled 10 times over before it is actually built. There will never be enough money to build jails and correctional facilities. And therefore, there is an imperative for all of us to have to explore how we can increase the accountability and the public safety related to community-based options. Nothing positive truly is happening in jail. Most of the people in jail do not need to be managed in that type of secure environment. Jail is the most overused sanction and most expensive sanction available to us, and it's the least creative. To be effective, a jail must, in fact, be part of a graduated continuum of sanctions, which has expanded correctional capacity and utilizes the jail really only in the last resort for those people who really truly need to be incapacitated. The jail usually reflects all that is dysfunctional in the rest of the criminal justice system. And incarceration is not, and never has it been for the last century, a deterrent to crime. However, jail is today's preferred sanction by most offenders. They tell their criminal defense counsel, as well as the public defenders, please just let me do my time, because community supervision, parole, probation, even pretrial release supervision is too tough for these offenders. So we know we're doing something right on the community side. Now they want to be in jail. Jail tends to be like a block party. You know, your friends are there, your family's there, and you have a lot you don't get on the street. For many people, 3 hots and a cot is quite a lot. Let me just say in closing, I have also thought about the how to do your plan. I have been part of, shifting gears just a little bit, I've been part of many anti-drug summit initiatives. As much as a decade and a half ago, I was actually one of the designers of the initiatives that were successfully undertaken in the state of Maryland, for instance, to have an annual drug summit and to figure out how to draft a plan that had relevance and had an opportunity for success. So let me just say to you, consistent with your theme, here's the urgency of how. Here's some recommendations that I think that as you go about the actual development and drafting of your plan, you might want to take into consideration. The big question is, how do we initiate change in the most change-resistant environment that exists? It takes communication, it takes collaboration, it takes political courage, and it takes leadership. To start it, you should have what I call the MOMI, the MOMI formula, and that is a memorandum of mutual intent that, in fact, is short but concise and to the point, wherein all the heads of all the critical agencies in Harris County as well as Houston actually sign and agree to collaborate and go forth to actually implement a plan. The communication and collaboration, as I say, are critical, but it has to transcend levels of bureaucracy and organizations as well as parameters of authorities. You have to have a close affiliation with elected officials, particularly state elected officials, who are the ones who introduce the bills that become laws that make many times our jobs a lot more difficult and increase the penalties for certain offenses that, in fact, cause us the greatest amount of consternation in terms of managing these folks. I think you've got to set goals that are truly realistic, that will have a significant problem or significant impact on your myriad problems, but the goals must be supported by attainable, achievable, and measurable objectives. Identify your agents of change and give to them within the agencies, have them as your representatives so that these people truly do have the authority to transcend the lines of bureaucracy to be task-oriented towards success. And keep your summit momentum going. The energy, the creativity, the communication that you have experienced over these 2 days is absolutely magnificent, but it needs to be the propeller for a lot of further dialogue that really needs to culminate annually in a like summit. So with that, I'm going to close. I might have time for a question or two. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your totally accurate portrayal of what is really happening and regarding your comments about commercial bail bondsmen. They are parasites on the criminal justice system and should be legislatively abolished as per the recommendation of the American Bar Association.
Thank you. I heard you talk about the prosecutors, and some of them are young, and I always state that they're young. Some of them are aggressive, overly aggressive and arrogant, and it's kind of like a problem in the courtroom. I'd like to share something with you. Year before last, I was on my way back from Austin, testifying before the Judiciary Committee. I got a phone call from HPD that 3 young ladies had gotten in trouble. This was in April. The incident happened in February. So when I got back to Houston, I called HPD the next day, and these 3 young ladies got into an altercation. They went to a home of one of the young ladies that was in the car with them. She got in an altercation with a roommate. The other 2 young ladies never got out of the car, stayed in the car. All the evidence showed that they never got out of the car. I went to court with this young lady 3 times. 3 times the prosecutor tried to get these young ladies to sign for 9 months probation. I'm like this, why would they do that? They're not guilty. So finally, let me make it short. The last day I went to court with them, the prosecutor wanted to talk to me. The lawyer said, will you talk to him? I said, of course I will. We went into the small room. He came in, he said, young ladies? I said, wait a minute. I'm not going to let you jump these young ladies like that. They haven't done anything. He scratched his head, he walked out. The attorney said, well, he's going down to get papers to have a trial by jury. I said, that's fine, because I'm going to be here every time they come to court. He came back in, 1 document, sat at the table, signed his name, and pushed the paper toward me. He said, this case is over. If I had not been persistent, these young ladies would have their lives ruined. One of them tried to get a job after that, and she was told that it came up on the record. They need to know that once they are on record, it's going to show. Once they're arrested, it's going to show up. I went to the court and pulled a copy of the dismissal, and the young lady was able to get employment because of an over-aggressive prosecutor. That's one of our problems in the system. I too toured the jail. A lot of things I could say about that. I don't have time to show all of that. But I'm just showing how a lot of these people are railroaded in these courtrooms because of the incompassion shown by judges. Thank you very much.
No, and let me just say also real quickly, and I kind of abbreviated my remarks because I know that we've got a time issue here, but one of the most common themes that we see, county after county, jail after jail, is the issue around overcharging and overly aggressive prosecution. And I really do think that, maybe not in this room where I don't believe anybody is naive about any of these issues, but I will tell you that I don't believe that the general public truly knows who is in jail. Because I will tell you, there are homeless people that are taking up that $75 a day expensive hotel bed, otherwise known as the county jail. There are many, many mentally ill people. There are many developmentally disabled people who do not even know where they are. And they have been given 30-day sentences on a trespass because they wouldn't stop sleeping on the park bench. I mean, I can't tell you that a more meaningful exercise exists than a profile of who is in jail. And that is what we do. We go in and we look at every file of the standing population, and present that back to the system and say, okay, you only have so many beds. Who's going to be in those beds? And can't we find a less expensive and a much more meaningful option in which to manage these people in the community? And as I said, now with the economy the way it is and the county revenues across the country not able to build these expensive beds, which on an average are $100,000 to $120,000 a bed, new construction, we've got to learn how to do this business better. And we've got to put more of an investment of creativity and service delivery to address the problems of these individuals that are not going to be addressed by putting them in an overcrowded jail facility. Not one thing positive happens there. I was a warden for a number of years, I can tell you. Absolutely. Well, I'm getting the time sign. Is there any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Insko. Appreciate your input, and certainly, as the gentleman said, her accurate depiction of what's going on. It certainly gives someone like me an opportunity to get a sense of what's going on. It's my hope that clearly this sort of gathering would be something that would have a lot more interest from my media brethren. Typically, unless we called and said there was a stabbing going on here, they wouldn't necessarily be here, and I know that that's on the webcast, that's the way it goes. I fight that from inside because there are a lot of efforts going on in our community on a continual basis to make things better. Our business sometimes is not skewed to cover that sort of thing, and that's one of the things. I'm an eternal optimist, so that means I'm always fighting within to make it better, and hopefully one of these days we'll have, instead of Rice University web cameras here, we'd have other media cameras here, people digging, wanting to find other reasons and ways in getting that out. Some call me a maverick, but that term's being used a lot these days, so I'll stay away from that term. Earlier, we started with Harris County government getting an input from Judge Emmett about the kinds of things that were being done on the county level. Clearly, there's a federal level, a national legislative level that we need to get help and focus from as well. And we're pleased to have this morning one of the hardest working congressional members that I know here this morning to talk about what is happening on the efforts of Congress to address drug use, drug trafficking, and sentencing aspects of drug-related crimes and other legislation that has either been sponsored by her or that she hopes to be sponsored by her. She is now in her 7th term. Time flies when she's having fun, I know. 7th term as a member of the United States House of Representatives representing the 18th Congressional District. Please give a warm welcome for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. There's always drama.
Good morning to you. I think it's almost afternoon, but you can wake up a little bit. There's not much introduction that you get when you're in your own hometown, but let me say to you that I'm a senior member of the House Judiciary Committee and been working on the issues of the inequality in the sentencing of crack cocaine since coming to the United States Congress in 1995. I'm a senior member of the Subcommittee on Crime, and through those efforts I've been working with this great organization and the work that the city has done. So I wish to pay great tribute to Ray Andrews, who has managed to carry forth a strong, committed advocacy for fairness and justice at the local level, collaboration with so many of you, and as well the county. So if you can applaud for the speaker, then applaud for Ray Andrews and, of course, the work that all of you have done. I still don't think it's a loud enough applause, so why don't you try it again? Applaud for the work that you've done, for Ray Andrews, and all of the work. I still seem to see a few people, Ray, that can't get their hands together, but that's okay. I spotted them all. Reverend Nash, thank you for your enthusiasm. I appreciate it very much. We appreciate it. I won't take up much of your time. I will share a few thoughts with you and wish you a great challenge and champion. I want to thank the esteemed judge, or I think that he will be coming here for the 12 o'clock. Is Judge Creuzot here? Thank you so very much for the leadership that you've given to the drug courts, never giving up, always holding on and making it work. I imagine that if we could open this room up to those whose lives you've changed through the concept of a drug court, there would be standing room only. And so we are grateful for you, and I look forward to having the opportunity in what I expect to be a new White House and a new Congress, that we can actually be fair in the question of dealing with the criminal justice system and as well the rehabilitation system and the society of those who have been utilizing drugs. Let me quickly say to you that this whole issue of drug use, as Ray Andrews has indicated, I'm sure in his opening remarks, but as we have worked together, is no respect of race, color, or creed, or wealth, or poverty. And one of the things that I hope is recognized by those of you in this room, and I don't have a list of the participants, but I know that you come from far and wide, and I'm glad that the faith community is recognized or represented here, is that we do need a wake-up call in America. Years past, there was obviously the Just Say No, and progressives and liberals made light of that, and we moved into maybe a more concrete way of looking at the question of drugs when people were engaged in the idea of the proliferation of drugs in our community. And then we sort of slid down the mountain. We looked at drugs in an isolated perspective. Methamphetamine was taking rage in places like the Midwest, Arkansas, and in the South, and various individuals were being blown up by meth labs, and all of a sudden a DEA, which I know must be in the room, attention was turned to busting meth labs. We left heroin and crack and cocaine off to the side, and now we see a surge of heroin use as we see thousands upon thousands of our soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We know that we're going to have, in addition to post-traumatic stress disorder, quite a bit of issues dealing with our returning soldiers who have been exposed to drug use. And because of the crisis of where they've been, the drug use will be taking over their lives and the lives of their families. So those of us who have advocated for a fair look-see at the utilization of drugs and how the federal government addresses it really need to arm ourselves and roll our sleeves up to begin to look at how we can now include the federal government as part of our policy structure to renew its fight against drugs and be more wise in our efforts to do so. I would ask you to take a look-see at H.R. 4545, my legislation in the House, Joe Biden's legislation in the Senate, which is the Drug Sentencing Reform and Cocaine Kingpin Trafficking Act of 2007. For those of you who look to the court decision that might have suggested that the disparities between the sentencing of crack cocaine has been ruled unconstitutional or illegal by the courts, take another look. And judge will tell you that that was a narrowly drawn decision that indicated that the courts, the judge, the federal court, had the right to use their discretion. But the U.S. attorneys across America said the law is still the same and that they will, in fact, use their legal rights to press for high sentencing for those using crack, simple possession, and as well for those using cocaine. But the U.S. Sentencing Commission recently called out to Congress to do something, to respond to the imbalance, the cases that we've seen, the young lady, for many of you who've become a symbol of the inequities of crack cocaine sentencing in Virginia, who was a young college student at Hampton University, fell unfortunately into the bad arms of a drug I put a small kingpin on that. They lived together. She became pregnant by him, but as well, she was not the culprit, but was ultimately sentenced to 25 years in the federal prison system for being associated with her boyfriend who was selling crack. Her case became a cause célèbre, working with her Congressperson Bobby Scott, the chairperson of the Subcommittee on Crime, working with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and that young lady appeared with me on a panel that I had on the issue of disparities. She is now out raising her son and going across America to wake us up about how we can treat the unfairness of the sentencing, but how we can rehabilitate these individuals. So my legislation, H.R. 4545, which we look forward to having hearings on in the next Congress, is to recognize, if you will, that we have to do something, and to take hold of the call of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, who we've had before our committee many, many times, to equalize the sentencing, one, to ensure that we repeal, if you will, the disparities, and to repeal the imbalance in the sentencing in the law, and to deny and to not increase the sentencing for crack cocaine, which has been called on by those who are misdirected and confused. So what do we need to do as you move forward for your agenda? And let me congratulate all of you, the Houston-Harris County Office of Drug Policy, for the 10-year plan that you're just finishing. And now you're looking forward to a 5-year plan. I think the first aspect of that plan is to raise the profile of the inequities of drug sentencing, both, I would say, in the state system, prison system, and the federal, and to call upon the next president of the United States to elevate the position of drug czar so that it is a visible, focused leadership position, not a castaway of someone who you're not interested in hearing from, so that that person is preparing and appearing before members of the United States Congress, House and Senate, with an effective agenda that, in fact, you are part of. This should not take a back seat. It should not be a yawn. It should not be something we think about if there is some brutal act that is perpetrated by someone crazed by drugs. It should be a look at how we rehabilitate America. Because I can tell you that your next door neighbor, your office mate, your best friend, your member of your church, an upstanding civic leader is probably abusing drugs. It may be that they're prescription drugs, it may be that they're crack cocaine or heroin, but they are abusing drugs. It may be one of your winners of your various heroic medals that the military gives to the heroes of the wars on the front lines. It certainly is your young people, teenagers of all levels of economic ability, who are experimenting, as you well know, with the medicine cabinet drugs, or are the new victims of the local crack dealer on the street who is looking for the next, if you will, level of boost in his or her income. It's the prostitute who has been made a prostitute because of their addiction to drugs. And so the quietness of which we now fight the war on drugs is unacceptable. There needs to be a boost in our spirit. There needs to be an implosion in our programs and our planning and our message. CNN needs to be tuned in. MSNBC needs to get a life and get on something that we can understand and benefit from. Our local, if you will, media need to be engaged in this process. We need to be unashamed of going into our schools, both our elementary and middle schools and high schools. And so my legislation is a wake-up call to America. It is clearly to embarrass those who have been silent. It is clearly to challenge those who will say no, and it is clearly to inspire those who will say yes. In our legislation, we boldly go into the sentencing process and answer the call of the U.S. Sentencing Commission. At the same time, we recognize that law enforcement is important, and I want to thank the DA for all of the work that they do. Thank the law enforcement persons of all of our local jurisdictions. You can applaud for them. Thank the DEA and all of our law enforcement that work on these issues every single day. As a municipal court judge, there were many times that I gave search warrants to undercover agents, of which I had to question over and over again. One, for the fact, are you truly and surely a police officer? You surely do not look like one. And we had a bit of humor in that, but then to ensure that they knew that this was, in fact, the crack house. They're out there working, and we must juxtapose their work along with the rights of citizens and the fairness of the warrant and making sure that we are in the right lane as we do our work. But we must thank them for the work that they have done. But as they do their work, then we must recognize that the court systems and the social justice system has to be a complement. And so I encourage the advocacy for the continued funding of the drug courts that have found themselves wobbling and weaveling through the legislative process and the funding. They all say we don't have enough money. Well, they may not have enough money for those who will be breaking into their homes or causing some elderly person to lose their life because of a crazed crackhead who could, in fact, be in rehabilitation. Remember now, crackheads don't give you flowers. In fact, they let you down. They go once, twice, 3 times, maybe before they can get their lives back on track. But is it for us to say they're a throwaway? No, because their crackness then permeates their families. It brings their families down. It brings their children down. And so we have to recognize that we're investing in America. And so as I offer to you, hopefully an encouragement for the 5-year plan, the next 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, let me say to you that all of us have a job to do. Because I can assure you as a member of the United States Congress, with the financial collapse of our markets, with the confusion in Iraq, with the determination of the need of a surge in Afghanistan, with earthquakes that have occurred in Pakistan this morning, and the loss of life that will probably go up, our minds are distracted. We have to govern a nation. We have to fix broken places where hurricanes and tornadoes have come. We have to worry about making sure that the economy is creating jobs. And yes, in a day or two, we have to worry about the election that will change the direction of America and as well, we hope, change the focus of the world on us. But if those of us who can be multitasked are not working to have the agenda ready for a new Congress, for a new White House, then we ourselves can only look to ourselves. And so I hope that you will help me pass H.R. 4545, because it will not be easy. Because when we only have 2 or 3 people that will help me pass H.R. 4545. Because it will not be easy. Because the standard bearers of holding up the flag will accuse us of being soft on crime. Members who have to run for re-election will not want an ad saying that they have let all of the Willies out of jail and all of the Marys out of jail. They won't want to see that ad. They'll be looking around for where is the body politic, where's the faith community, where are the big churches and little churches and synagogues and mosques and places of worship, where are all the social service agencies, where are the Republicans, where are the independents, where are the Democrats, conservative, moderates, and liberals? Where are the people that will raise their voices and say right is right, justice is justice? That is what is the call. So 4545 in the House and then the Senate bill looks to equalize this sentencing, eliminate the disparities, and deny the right to increase it. It also looks to the idea of making sure the kingpins don't run around. And as you well know, when we put a bill forward, we got to make sure we've got some teeth in it to help us get the kingpins, not the little guys rolling up and down the street. So it does have some teeth in it about making sure that you get those who are actually conspiring. So as I close, let me simply suggest to you that as I travel around this world, when I engage with our friends in Mexico. When we talk about undocumented individuals and illegal immigration and issues where we're negotiating around the table, then we do have, of course, the question, we may send it, but you use it. We can't get away from that. America is competing as the #1 consumer of drugs. Our competitors are those who get their pure heroin from Afghanistan, purest in the world, going into Europe. They have their problems. But since I know that most of you will not run quickly to legalize certain drugs, as some of our European friends have done, then we've got to do something. And the something is to ensure that we are fair in the justice system and that we have a complementary program of rehabilitation. And so we're going to go in and fix and make better the Second Chance Act, but we hear tell that folk are not even using it. Second Chance Act has been passed by the president, and rather than the criminal justice system trying to find out how many people they can keep out of it, you as advocates need to get in there and see how many people you can put into the Second Chance bill. I had to fight for some rich person to get into it. As they said, they were too rich, they didn't need it. Anybody's life that is broken needs to get into the Second Chance Act and get themselves together. So, my friends, we need to roll up our sleeves and be part of the fight. I think this year, 2008, if I may end on a note in the moment of history, is a telling year. For those of us who are students of the civil rights movement and had a small measure of opportunity to be engaged, I can tell you this is 40 years since the death of a modern-day earthly prophet who talked about a mountaintop and a promised land. This is 40 years since the death of a Bobby Kennedy who went into Appalachia and shined his light on those who were living in abject poverty. It's 45 years since the dreamer went to the Lincoln Memorial and talked to us about a dream. And lo and behold, there's an opportunity, an historic opportunity, for someone that most of us would never imagine to have the rooted roots in African history and the history of this country to be elected President of the United States of America. This is a momentous year. For those of you who support that cause, we're together. For those of you not, you can be together for change. And so if anything comes out of this conference, be prepared to fight the fight, to elevate this question of saving lives to the highest levels of government. Let it be the agenda of the President's cabinet. Let it be the agenda of the Speaker of the House. Let it be the agenda of the Majority Leader of the United States Senate. Let it be the agenda of the American people that we stand for saving a life. No one in America is a throwaway. Everyone deserves human dignity. With all of that, I thank you for your courtesies. May God bless you, and God bless America. I will take 2 questions, if there are any. Thank you, Judge. It's good to see you. And I don't want to leave out any other judges in here. Thank you, judges, if you're here, and advocates. Yes, sir, Reverend Nash.
This might not be a question, but I'm pretty sure the drug courts use some more funding.
Yes.
Young lady right there doing a wonderful job with the courts. Thank God for Judge Crusoe. We got out here to help us to get these courts implemented. So she needs some funding. The drug courts need funding.
You've got 2 drug court judges.
Where are they at?
If they would stand, let me see them.
Will you stand, please? Judge
Where-
Cosper? Yeah, all right. All right.
Are you in
Tom,
Harris County?
We need some funding for the courts.
Okay. Thank you. No, obviously, I will work closely. I think you have some great senators in this area, and Dallas Senator Royce West has been a champion of the issue, knows it well. Senator Ronnie Ellis knows it well, and all the House members. So what I ask of you, you're right, but remember the People's House are in your hands. In the House of Representatives, we are called the People's House. We've got to hear from you. And I know you do come, but we've got to hear in a more explosive manner. And I'm on Homeland Security, so I'm very sensitive to using words like explosive. But in an explosive manner, you've got to be uncalmed. You can't be calm by being patted on the back and that we're with you. And the representative from SAMHSA, let me thank her for your leadership as well in fighting the fight. SAMHSA needs money. When we start focusing on funding for HHS, SAMHSA is on the bottom rung, and we've got to kick the wheels and fight. But we're going to be fighting louder and more clearly now because we think we have someone that might sign the legislation, recognizing that change comes in all different shapes, sizes, and so we hope that that might be the case. Again, obviously, November 4th has not yet come, so I do not foresee what might happen, but I'm an optimistic person, praying every day, and the prayers of the righteous availeth much. So I'm hoping for the best on November 4th, 2008. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Eric Collins, and I'd like to thank you for being a part of this summit also. And I just want to say that I'm a product of the drug court. 4 years ago, they had a decision.
Amen. Somebody need to say amen, as we say in the church. Amen.
And now I'm, I've been working for the city for 2 years, and I'm attending ACC.
Amen.
About to get my associate's degree in human services. And I can't. I don't even have the words to thank Judge Thomas and Judge Cosper and Mary Covington and everybody who has been involved in the drug court process, because my thoughts and process and soul and everything about me has changed. And I just want to thank everyone for their participation in drug court. Thank you.
You're to be commended, and as you heard me say, it's going to take everybody of all political persuasions to make this work, and we thank you for being a shining example. Yes, sir, Reverend.
Yes, on behalf of the Houston Ministers Against Crime, the Baptist Ministers Association of Houston and vicinity,
yes, sir, Reverend
Houston
Gilmore.
Metropolitan Baptist Association, our presidents, I want to present to you a copy of the book, Hope After Dope, From a Drug Addict to a Doctor, written by myself. We support you 175%. I'd like to get a picture of this. And our preacher, Reverend Hubbard, could you come on up? Reverend Nash, could you come on up? Because at 13, I started smoking weed. At 16, I was using heroin.
Testify.
At 19, I tried to commit suicide.
Testify.
I have 5 academic degrees.
Oh.
All of the research in the world is not as powerful as the Spirit of God. And so we say we stand for those, every child, every boy, every girl. There is hope after dope. And I'm living proof after 30 years of being in the ministry. So we say thank you, Sheila Jackson Lee, our congresswoman, your congresswoman, and we do need change because the system is broke. Can we get our picture? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
But did you get it, sir?
Get that
Sorry.
The system is broke.
Oh, my God.
Hurry up, because they're moving on.
Very unusual. That's unusual. We know that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
I feel a happening going on, and I can leave now, happy as I can be. They say they have a happy feet dance. I'm a happy feet on out of here because you all are in the mix, and I know good things are going to happen. Thank you all very much. God bless you, as I said, and God bless America. Thank you, Helen George. I just laid my eyes on Helen George. Can you just stand up? Helen, just stand up. Hold on 1 minute. My tribute to Helen George has been a friend of mine, and that's like a personal privilege because you say I'm talking about friends, and I know they're in here. You know I can't top Reverend Gilmore, but Helen George, in the juvenile justice system, she helped me bring Paul Wellstone here. Many of you know Paul Wellstone, God rest his soul, Senator Wellstone, when we visited the juvenile system dealing with mental health in juveniles. And my one PS, thank goodness that the president signed the mental health parity bill, the one good thing coming out of the financial rescue bill that will help us with getting mental health and drug abuse, all of that woven together. Thank you for the work that you've done for our young people. Thank you all again. Okay.
I don't know anybody who works harder than Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I know that if she could ask for 2 more hours or 4 more hours in the day, she'd use those too. But thank you for all that you do, Congresswoman, on behalf of not only the constituents of the 18th Congressional District, but all folks here in Southeast Texas. It's an amazing act that you do, and we'll have to catch up on the kids at another time. I thought we'd have time to talk about our children, but another time.
We'll do that, but you have it because you'll be there in the Christmas party that you got to skip last year. You can't skip it this year.
Okay, that's putting a lot of pressure on the brother, but thank you. Okay, we got children. Okay, you just let me know which date it is. I'll be there. It's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. By the way, it's time, instead of the work session is going to be done after lunch. I know you've been working hard, bringing in all the information that's been going on, very valuable information, and Dr. Landry is ready to have at it to help decide how do we solve the problem, this mapping strategy that is planned for now. The time has just gotten away from us. Lunch is next. There will be volunteers available to escort all of you to the Great Hall, the Grand Hall, the Rice University Student Center for lunch, and then you'll be getting announcements and getting information about the progress of the afternoon after that. It's been my pleasure to be a part of this morning, and I hope that I said I'm the eternal optimist, always hoping for better outcomes at every opportunity, and I'm hopeful that the next time we have a gathering like this, that there will be more, much like Congresswoman Jackson Lee said, much more from the local media. I don't care about what everybody else does, my specific station in terms of covering these kinds of events, because it is, in fact, the foundation of everything that's good and positive about what our community is going to be comes from this kind of gathering. And I'm afraid that always, unless there's violence involved, they're not interested. And unfortunately, they get on the backside of when it doesn't happen here, then we get the violence. So I'm eternally optimistic, but in the meantime, I'm eternally optimistic that you'll have a wonderful lunch and a fabulously outstanding afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this morning. Helen George, I love you.